The night Alessia Moretti walked into the Belisario Hotel Gala in a blood-red dress, every man in that room thought they knew who she was. Luca de Rossi's wife, the boss's woman, beautiful decoration on a dangerous man's arm. They were wrong. By midnight, the most powerful crime lord in the city would be on his knees, and the woman they'd dismissed for a decade would own everything he'd built. This is the story of how a queen took her throne, not with violence, but with something far more lethal: patience. If you want to see how far power, betrayal, and perfect revenge can go, stay until the end. Drop a like, leave a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. And let me show you what happens when the wrong person gets underestimated. The scar on Luca de Rossi's left hand came from a knife fight in Naples when he was 17. Alessia had traced it 1,000 times in the early years, back when she thought the violence in him was something noble, something protective. Now, watching him drum those scarred fingers against the mahogany table in their estate's dining room, all she felt was tired. "You're not listening," Luca said. Alessia looked up from her tablet, where she'd been reviewing the quarterly reports from their shipping operations. The morning light cut through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting everything in harsh angles. She'd chosen this house 5 years ago specifically for these windows. You could see anyone coming up the drive long before they reached the door. "I'm listening," she said. Her voice came out flat, automatic, the tone she'd perfected over 13 years of marriage. "Marco says the Vitelli family is making noise about the waterfront contracts." "Marco's an idiot." Luca's fingers stopped drumming. "Excuse me? The Vitelli family isn't making noise. Carlo Vitelli is dying, brain cancer. His nephew Tommaso is positioning himself for the succession, and he's doing it badly because he's 26 and thinks volume equals power." Alessia set down the tablet. "If you'd read the intelligence briefs I compile every week instead of having Marco summarize them wrong, you'd know that." For a moment, something flickered across Luca's face. It might have been respect once. Now it looked more like irritation that she'd caught him unprepared. "So, what do you suggest?" he asked. "Send a gift to Carlo. Something generous. Flowers. Maybe a donation to the Cancer Research Center in his name. Then invite Tommaso to lunch. Somewhere public. Somewhere he'll feel important." Alessia picked up her coffee, found it cold, set it down again. "He's young and scared and trying to prove himself. Give him the illusion of respect, make him feel seen, and he'll quiet down. Maybe even become useful when Carlo's gone." Luca was already pulling out his phone to text Marco. He didn't say thank you. He never did anymore. Alessia watched him type, taking in the details she'd cataloged over the past year. The way his shirts fit a little tighter around the middle now that he'd stopped going to the gym regularly. The gray creeping into his temples that he'd started dying away. The expensive watch he'd bought himself last month, a Patek Philippe that cost more than some people's houses, because Gianna had apparently mentioned she liked men who wore nice watches. Gianna, 23, bottle blonde, a cocktail waitress at Nero's, one of their clubs downtown. Luca thought Alessia didn't know. Alessia knew everything. She knew Gianna had a sister in art school and a mother with diabetes who couldn't afford her medication. She knew Gianna's apartment rent was $1,800 a month, and that Luca had been paying it since March. She knew the girl's favorite restaurant, an overpriced Italian place in the theater district, her shoe size, 7.5. And the fact that she'd Googled how to tell if a married man will leave his wife at 2 a.m. last Tuesday. The intelligence came from Sophia, Alessia's personal assistant, though assistant was a pale word for what Sophia actually was. Sophia had worked for Alicia for 9 years. She was 42, looked 50, and could make a person disappear so cleanly that even their own mother would believe they'd just decided to start over somewhere else. She was also fiercely, violently loyal in a way that Luca's men never had been. "I have a meeting downtown at 11, Luca said, standing up. He didn't look at her. "Don't wait up tonight. Business dinner." "Of course," Alessia said. She waited until she heard his Mercedes pull out of the drive before picking up her phone. Sophia answered on the first ring. "Yes?" "He's going to see her today, probably around 1, after his meeting." "You want photos?" "No, I have enough photos." Alessia walked to the window, looking out over the gardens she'd designed herself. Roses and lavender and climbing jasmine. Beautiful things with thorns. "I want you to pull the full financial breakdown on the 7th Street property deal, the one from 2019. Everything, contracts, transfer records, the offshore accounts he used, and get me the name of every city official he bribed to make it happen. There was a pause on the other end, then, "You're building the file." "I'm finishing the file. There's a difference." "When?" "Soon." Alessia closed her eyes, feeling the sun on her face through the glass. "How's the situation with Domenico?" Domenico Caruso ran their East Side operations, drugs mostly, with some weapons trafficking on the side. He was 60, vicious, and had been with Luca since the beginning. He was also greedy in ways that Luca had started to overlook because Domenico knew how to make money, and Luca liked money more than he liked loyalty anymore. "He's receptive," Sophia said carefully. "I had coffee with his daughter yesterday, the one who handles his books." And she's tired of watching her father's profits get skimmed by Luca's personal expenses. Apparently the boss spent $40,000 last month on jewelry. None of it for you. Alessia smiled without humor. "Tell Domenico's daughter that I remember when she graduated from Cornell. I sent flowers. Tell her that when things change, people who were smart enough to see it coming will be rewarded." "Understood. One more thing. I need the guest list for the Belisario Gala finalized by tomorrow. Make sure the Castellano family gets an invitation. All of them." The Castellanos ran the city's gambling operations and had been allies with the De Rossi family for 20 years. They also hated waste and disloyalty, and their matriarch, Isabella Castellano, was a woman who understood exactly what it took to build an empire. "This is really happening," Sophia said quietly. "It's been happening for 2 years," Alessia replied. "We're just reaching the final act." She ended the call and stood there in the empty house, listening to the silence. People thought power was loud. They thought it came with guns and shouting and blood on expensive suits. Luca thought that. He'd built his reputation on it. The enforcer who'd worked his way up from street collections to running the entire northeastern corridor. He'd killed his first man at 19, his first rival at 24, and by 30 he'd consolidated enough territory that the old families had no choice but to recognize him. And through all of it, Alessia had been there. She'd met him when she was 22, fresh out of business school, with a degree in finance and a job offer from a prestigious firm that would have set her up for a comfortable, boring life. Instead, she'd gone to a restaurant opening with her roommate and caught the attention of a dark-eyed man in an expensive suit who looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Luca had been charming then, attentive. He'd sent flowers to her office, taken her to restaurants where the waiters knew his name, listened when she talked about market analysis and investment strategies like what she said actually mattered. He'd made her feel seen in a way no one ever had. The marriage proposal came 6 months later on a rooftop overlooking the city, with fireworks he'd arranged specifically for the occasion. She'd said yes because she loved him, because she thought they were partners, because when he told her about his family's business, carefully testing her reaction, she'd seen it not as something criminal, but as something complex that needed organization, structure, intelligence. "You could help me build something," he'd said, "not just a business, an empire." And she had. While Luca handled the violent side, the enforcement, the territory disputes, the message sending that kept rivals in line, Alessia had built the infrastructure that made it all work. She'd set up the shell companies that cleaned their money. She'd identified the politicians worth bribing and the ones too honest to touch. She'd restructured their operations to maximize profit while minimizing risk, turning a street-level protection racket into a multi-million-dollar enterprise that touched everything from construction to shipping to real estate. She'd done it quietly. Luca got the credit, the fear, the reputation. That had been fine with her. She didn't need recognition. She needed effectiveness. But somewhere along the way, she could trace it back to about 3 years ago, right after they'd absorbed the Moretti family's assets in a hostile takeover that left 2 men dead and a third running for federal protection. Luca had started to believe his own legend, started thinking that the empire existed because of his strength rather than her strategy. He'd started making decisions without consulting her, taking meetings she wasn't invited to, spending money on things that served his ego rather than their organization. And then, inevitably, there had been the women. The first affair had been with a paralegal at their lawyer's office. Alessia had found out from Sophia and had briefly considered confronting Luca about it. Then she'd realized something. She didn't care. Not emotionally. The love had died somewhere between the 3rd lie and the 10th dismissive comment about her opinions. What she cared about was what the affair represented: a lack of discipline, a sloppiness that could get them caught. She'd ended it herself, quietly. A job offer in California for the paralegal, too good to refuse, arranged through a front company Alessia controlled. The woman had been gone within a month, and Luca had never even known Alessia knew. But there had been others after that: a cocktail waitress, a yoga instructor, a gallery owner who'd lasted almost 6 months before getting bored with being a secret. Luca had gotten careless about hiding them, and Alessia had realized he didn't care whether she knew. In his mind, it probably didn't matter. She was his wife. She'd stay. What else could she do? Everything, as it turned out. The file on Luca de Rossi lived in a safe deposit box in a bank 40 minutes outside the city, under a name that didn't exist in any database connected to Alessia Moretti. Inside the box were 3 flash drives, 2 folders of documents, and a leather notebook filled with handwritten dates, times, and observations. Every bribe Luca had ever paid, every body he'd buried, every law he'd broken, every asset he'd hidden, every mistake he'd made. Alessia had been compiling it for 26 months. It had started as insurance, something to protect herself if Luca ever decided she knew too much or became inconvenient. But as she'd worked on it, as she'd documented his increasing recklessness and decreasing effectiveness, it had evolved into something else: a blueprint for succession. She'd started testing the waters 6 months ago. Casual conversations with key players. Domenico, whose daughter handled his finances and understood that Luca's personal spending was eating into everyone's profits. Marco, yes, even Marco the idiot, who'd let slip during a dinner party that he was tired of cleaning up the boss's mistakes. Vincent Calabrese, who ran their construction operations and had been with the organization longer than Luca had been alive. Then there were the external relationships. The Castellano family, who valued competence over testosterone. The union bosses who'd been dealing with Alessia for years, while Luca glad-handed at charity dinners. The police captain whose kids' college tuition Alessia had quietly paid when his mother got sick. She'd been careful, never pushing, never asking for loyalty, just being present, being competent, being the person who solved problems instead of creating them. The realization that she could actually do this, that she could take it all, had come 3 months ago, during a meeting about their shipping operations. Luca had been an hour late, showed up smelling like perfume that wasn't Alessia's, and proceeded to override a contract negotiation she'd spent 6 weeks putting together because he didn't like the guy's attitude. Never mind that the guy represented a crucial connection to their European suppliers. Never mind that the contract would have increased their profit margin by 17%. Luca didn't like his attitude. Vincent had looked at her across the table, and she'd seen it in his eyes. This is unsustainable. She'd nodded, barely perceptible. Message received. That night, she'd gone home and started planning in earnest. The Belisario Hotel Gala was the social event of the year for the city's power players, legitimate and otherwise. Every crime family sent representatives. Every politician with ambitions showed up. It was neutral ground, a place where deals got made and alliances formed under the guise of charity work and champagne toasts. Luca loved it. The performance of it. The chance to be seen, to shake hands with senators and judges while everyone pretended not to know exactly how he made his money. Alessia had always gone with him, playing the role of the elegant Mafia wife. Beautiful dresses, minimal jewelry, a smile that gave away nothing. She was good at being decorative. This year would be different. "I'm not sure about the red," Sophia said, examining the dress hanging in Alessia's walk-in closet. It was a deep crimson, custom-made, with a neckline that was professional enough to take seriously, but dramatic enough to be remembered. "It's a strong choice. It's supposed to be." Alessia was sitting at her vanity, applying makeup with the precision of someone preparing for battle. "I want them to see me coming. They're going to know something's different." "Good." Sophia moved to stand behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "You're sure about this? Once you do this, there's no going back. Luca won't forgive it." "Luca," Alessia said carefully, "stopped being someone worth forgiving about 2 years ago. He'll fight." "Let him. He's been so busy playing king that he's forgotten how to actually run an empire." Alessia finished her lipstick, checked her reflection. She looked like herself, but sharper, more defined. Everyone who matters is already on our side. They just don't know it yet. Our side, Sophia repeated. I like the sound of that. Make sure Domenico gets the final numbers before tomorrow night, and confirm that Isabella Castellano will be there. Already done. She RSVP'd yes last week. She's bringing her sons. Perfect. The Castellano family carried weight. If Isabella stood with Alicia publicly, half the room would follow. Alessia's phone buzzed. A text from Luca. Won't be home tonight. Something came up. She showed it to Sophia, who snorted. Something. Right. Do we know where he is? Same place he's been every Thursday for 3 months, Gianna's apartment. He brought champagne this time, Dom Perignon, real classy. Alessia deleted the text. How much has he spent on her total? Between the rent, the gifts, the dinners, I'd estimate around 80,000 in 4 months. Document it, add it to the file. Alicia stood, smoothing down her dress. I want receipts for everything. You're going to bury him with his own credit card statements. Among other things. The night before the gala, Alessia had dinner with Isabella Castellano at a restaurant in the financial district. It was the kind of place where deals got made over wine that cost more per bottle than most people's monthly rent. Isabella was 73, sharp as a knife, and had been running her family's operations since her husband died 20 years ago. She'd expanded their gambling empire into 5 states, diversified into legitimate businesses, and earned the respect of every major player in the northeastern corridor. She also hated incompetence with a passion that bordered on religious. Your husband, Isabella said, cutting into her steak with surgical precision, is becoming a liability, not a question, a statement. I'm aware, Alessia said. The question is whether you're going to do something about it or keep playing the loyal wife while he runs your organization into the ground. Alessia took a sip of wine, buying time. This was the moment, the commitment. Once she said it out loud to Isabella Castellano, there was no pretending anymore. I'm going to do something about it, she said. Isabella studied her for a long moment. When? Tomorrow night. The gala. Isabella smiled, thin and approving. Public, smart, harder for him to make a scene. That's the idea. You have the support you need? Domenico, Vincent, most of the operational heads, the police captain, 3 city councilmen, your family, if you're willing. My family, Isabella said carefully, has always supported competent leadership. Your husband was competent once. Now he's not. If you're taking his place, you'll have our backing, but only if you're actually taking his place, not just slapping his wrist and hoping he improves. I'm taking everything, Alicia said. He'll have nothing left by the end of the week. Good. Men like Luca don't improve. They just find new ways to be disappointing. Isabella finished her wine. What are you doing about the girl? Gianna? Nothing. She's not the problem. Luca is. Generous of you. Not generous. Practical. She's a symptom, not a disease. Getting rid of her wouldn't change anything. Alicia paused. Though I am having her rent tripled at the end of the month. Let's see how long young love lasts when she's back to living in a studio apartment. Isabella laughed, genuinely amused. I like you, Alicia. I always have. You're wasted on a man who can't see past his own ego. Not for much longer. They talked strategy for another hour. Isabella promised that her sons would be visible at the gala, that when Alessia made her move, the Castellano family would stand with her. It was as good as a public endorsement, and they both knew it. When they parted ways outside the restaurant, Isabella caught Alicia's arm. Your husband is going to fight dirty, she said. He's going to call you ungrateful, disloyal, maybe worse. He's going to try to make this about you being a woman who doesn't know her place. I know. Make sure you're ready for it. The men in that room tomorrow night, some of them are going to want to believe him because it's easier than admitting a woman outsmarted them all. I'm not asking them to like it, Alessia said. I'm making it impossible for them to ignore it. Isabella smiled. Then I'll see you tomorrow night. The morning of the gala, Luca was in a good mood. He'd come home around 3 in the morning, showered, and actually joined Alicia for breakfast, a rarity these days. You're wearing the black suit tonight, right? Alicia asked, buttering toast she had no intention of eating. The Tom Ford. Why? Just wondering, it photographs well. Luca glanced up from his phone, suspicious. You planning something? It's a gala, Luca. Everyone photographs everything. I'm just trying to make sure we look good. He seemed to accept this, going back to his phone, probably texting Gianna. Alessia wondered if he'd promised to see her after the gala, or if he'd told her he couldn't because of his wife. She wondered if Gianna knew she was temporary, or if the girl actually thought Luca would leave his wife for her. Not that it mattered. After tonight, Gianna could have him. What was left of him, anyway. I invited the Castellanos, Alessia said casually. Luca looked up again. All of them? Isabella likes a full family showing at these things. You know how she is. She's a pain in the ass is what she is. Still thinks she can run things like it's the old days. She runs the most profitable gambling operation in 3 states. Because she's too stubborn to retire and let her sons take over. Alessia said nothing. Let him think what he wanted. Tomorrow, he'd understand exactly why stubborn women who refused to retire were dangerous. At 6 o'clock that evening, Alessia stood in front of her mirror in the red dress, checking every detail. Hair pulled back in a sleek twist, minimal jewelry, just her wedding ring and a pair of diamond earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. Makeup subtle but precise. She looked like power. Sophia appeared in the doorway. The car's ready. Luca's already downstairs. Is he bringing Gianna? No, he's not that stupid. Yet. Alessia took one last look at herself. This was it. The moment she'd been building toward for 2 years. After tonight, everything would be different. She picked up her clutch. Inside it, a flash drive with copies of everything in the safe deposit box, and headed downstairs. Luca was waiting by the door, checking his watch. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or suspicion. New dress? He asked. You like it? It's red. I felt like making a statement. You look like you're going to war. Alessia smiled. Don't be dramatic. It's just a party. They rode to the Belisario in silence, Luca on his phone the entire time. Alessia watched the city pass by outside her window, memorizing the moment. The last time she'd ride in this car as Luca de Rossi's wife, rather than his replacement. The hotel was already packed when they arrived. Valets, photographers, security everywhere. Luca played to the cameras, waving and smiling like a politician. Alessia stayed slightly behind him, the way she always had. For now. Inside, the ballroom was exactly as she remembered from previous years. Crystal chandeliers, round tables with white linens, a stage at the front for speeches and awards. The city's elite mingled with champagne and careful conversations, everyone assessing everyone else. Alessia spotted Isabella Castellano near the bar, surrounded by her 3 sons. Vincent Calabrese was talking to a city councilman near the windows. Domenico sat at a table with his daughter, watching the room with calculating eyes. They were all here, all the pieces. I need to talk to the mayor, Luca said, already moving away. Mingle or something. Alessia watched him go, then made her way toward Isabella. You look like war, Isabella said approvingly. That's the second time I've heard that tonight. Good. Let them see it coming. Makes the victory sweeter. They stood together, 2 women in a room full of men who thought they ran the world. Around them, conversations flowed, business, politics, gossip. Nobody paid much attention to Luca de Rossi's wife and the old woman who ran the Castellano family. That would change in about 30 minutes. Sophia appeared at Alessia's elbow. Everyone's in place. Vincent is ready. Domenico's daughter has the financial breakdown queued up on her tablet. The councilman knows his cue. And Luca? Drinking scotch with the mayor and telling the story about the construction union strike. He's on his 3rd glass. Perfect. Let him be loose, confident, unprepared. Alessia checked her watch. 8:47. The speeches usually started at 9. She had 13 minutes. It's time, she said quietly. Isabella nodded. I'll get my sons positioned. When you're ready, we'll back your play. Alessia made her way through the crowd, stopping at key tables, having brief conversations. A word with the police captain, a smile for the city councilman, a nod to Vincent. Each interaction was calibration, confirmation. Everyone knew their part. At 8:58, she found Luca near the stage, laughing with the mayor about something. He had lipstick on his collar, not hers. He probably didn't even notice. Luca, she said, can we talk for a minute? Kinda busy, babe. It's important. He sighed, annoyed, but followed her to a quieter corner. What? I wanted you to hear this from me first, Alessia said, out of respect for what we used to have. Hear what? You're done. For a moment he just stared at her, not understanding. Then he laughed. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you've become a liability to the organization. You're reckless, you're expensive, and you're making mistakes that are going to get people caught. She kept her voice level, factual. So I'm removing you. The laughter died. You're removing me. I have documentation of every illegal action you've taken in the past 5 years. Every bribe, every tax dodge, every body. I have testimony from 3 different people willing to put you at the scene of the Moretti takeover. I have financial records showing you've been skimming profits for personal expenses. And I have the support of everyone in this room who actually matters. Luca's face was turning red. You're bluffing. Am I? Look around, Luca. Really look. He did. And for the first time, he started to see it. Domenico, watching from across the room with his arms crossed. Vincent, standing near the stage with 2 other operation heads, Isabella Castellano and her sons, positioned like guards. You're insane, Luca said. These people are loyal to me. These people are loyal to profit and stability. You're providing neither anymore. Alicia glanced at her watch. In about 3 minutes, the mayor is going to call me up to that stage to say a few words about our charitable foundation. And I'm going to tell everyone in this room exactly what kind of man you really are. If you do this, you're dead. You understand that? You're dead. If you threaten me again, Alessia said calmly, I'll have Sophia send the complete file to the FBI. Everything. You'll be in federal custody before dessert is served. You wouldn't. I've already copied the file to 3 different locations with instructions to release it if anything happens to me. So yes, Luca, I would. On stage, someone was testing the microphone. The speeches were about to begin. Last chance, Alicia said. You can walk out right now. Take what you have left and disappear. I'll give you 24 hours before I freeze the accounts. Or you can stay and fight me in front of everyone, and I'll destroy you publicly. She could see him thinking, calculating, looking for an angle, a way out, something he could use. But there was nothing. She'd been too thorough. You were nothing when I met you, he said finally. Low and mean. You'd be nothing without me. You're right, Alessia said. I was nothing, and then I built an empire while you played king. The difference is, I remember who did the actual work. She turned and walked toward the stage, leaving him standing there. The mayor was at the microphone, calling for everyone's attention. Alessia climbed the steps, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. This was it, the point of no return. Ladies and gentlemen, the mayor said, I'd like to invite Alessia Moretti de Rossi to say a few words about the excellent work her foundation has been doing in our community. Alessia took the microphone. The room went quiet. She found Luca in the crowd. He was still standing where she'd left him, frozen. Thank you all for being here tonight, she began. I'm going to keep this brief, because I know you're all hungry and the food here is excellent. Polite laughter. They had no idea what was coming. For the past 13 years, I've had the privilege of working behind the scenes to build something meaningful in this city. Not just charitable work, though that matters, but real infrastructure, real organization, real power. She could feel the room's attention sharpening. This wasn't the usual speech. My husband, Luca de Rossi, has been the public face of our family's business interests, and he's been adequate in that role. The word landed like the slap. Adequate. In a room full of powerful men, it was an insult. But over the past few years, there have been some concerning developments. Financial mismanagement, operational mistakes, a lack of discipline that's put all of us at risk. Now people were getting uncomfortable. This was too specific, too pointed. So I'm announcing tonight that there's going to be a change in leadership. Effective immediately, I'll be taking over all operational control of the de Rossi family interests. The room erupted. Not in applause, in shocked conversation, everyone talking at once. Alessia waited for it to die down, then continued. I have documentation supporting this decision, financial records, testimony, evidence of gross negligence. Anyone who wants to see it is welcome to schedule a meeting with my office. She looked directly at Luca. And anyone who wants to challenge this decision is welcome to try. But I think you'll find that the people who actually make this organization run have already made their choice. On cue, Domenico stood up. Then Vincent, then Isabella Castellano and her sons. One by one, the room's real power players stood, making their allegiance clear. Luca was still standing, but now he was alone. "This is a coup," he shouted. "You can't do this." "I already have," Alessia said calmly into the microphone. "The question now is whether you leave quietly or make this harder than it needs to be." For a moment, she thought he might actually rush the stage. His hands were clenched, his face purple with rage. But then he looked around at the room, at all the people who'd worked for him, depended on him, feared him, and saw nothing but closed faces and turned backs. He'd lost. And everyone knew it. Luca turned and walked out of the ballroom. No security stopped him. No one called after him. He was already gone. Alessia handed the microphone back to the mayor, who looked like he'd just witnessed a car accident. Then she walked off the stage and directly to Isabella Castellano. "Well," Isabella said, "that was more dramatic than I expected. I wanted to be clear." "Oh, you were clear. The question is what happens tomorrow when he realizes this wasn't a nightmare." "Tomorrow," Alessia said, "we start freezing assets and restructuring operations. I want everything Luca touched in the past 5 years audited and cleaned. No loose ends." Sophia appeared with a glass of wine. "You did it." "We did it." Alessia took the wine, realized her hand was shaking slightly. Adrenaline crash. She'd been running on pure will for the past hour. "Is he gone?" "Out the front door, got in his car and drove off." "Put someone on him. I want to know where he goes, who he talks to." "Already done." Vincent approached, looking shaken but determined. "That was bold. It was necessary. Half the room is going to be calling you tomorrow asking what this means for their operations. Tell them it means business as usual, but better. No more personal drama. No more ego-driven decisions. Just clean, efficient operations that make everyone money." "And Luca?" "Luca," Alessia said, "is no longer our concern." She stayed at the gala for another hour, having necessary conversations, reassuring nervous allies, making it clear that the transition would be smooth. By the time she left, most of the room had accepted the new reality. The ones who hadn't didn't matter. Sophia drove her home in silence. When they pulled up to the estate, Alessia's estate now technically, every light was off except the one in the study. "You think he came back?" Sophia asked. "I think he's going to try one more time to assert control. Men like Luca don't accept defeat easily." They went inside carefully. The house was silent. Alessia found him in the study, sitting in the dark with a glass of scotch. "You should go," she said quietly. "This is my house. Actually, it's in my name. Has been since we bought it. You might want to check the deed." He threw the glass. It shattered against the wall 6 inches from her head. Sophia moved, but Alessia held up a hand. "Wait. Feel better?" Alessia asked. "You think you won," Luca said. "You think because you pulled some dramatic stunt at a party that you're in charge now, but you don't understand how this works. Those men, they'll never actually respect you. They'll smile and nod and then do whatever they want because you're just a woman," Alessia finished. "That's what you were going to say, right? I'm just a woman, so I can't possibly run an organization built on violence and fear. You don't have what it takes. I've been running it for 10 years, Luca. You were just too stupid to notice." She walked to the desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a folder. "Here. This is every operation I've overseen, every deal I've structured, every problem I've solved while you were out playing gangster. Read it, or don't. It doesn't matter anymore." She dropped the folder on the desk in front of him. "You have until noon tomorrow to remove your personal effects from this house. After that, the locks change. You have 48 hours to close out any personal accounts before I freeze everything with the De Rossi name on it. And you have 1 week to leave the city before I decide you're a loose end that needs to be cut." "You're going to kill me?" He sounded almost hopeful, like if she killed him, it would prove she was as bad as him. "No. Killing you would make you a martyr. I'm going to let you live with the fact that you had everything and lost it because you couldn't see past your own ego." Alessia walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and Luca, Gianna's rent is being tripled next month. Let's see how much she loves you when you can't pay for her anymore." She left him there in the dark and went upstairs to her room. Her room now, not theirs. Sophia was waiting in the hallway. "You okay?" "I'm perfect," Alessia said, and meant it. She'd won. Alessia didn't sleep that night. She sat in the study with the door locked, going through files and making lists while the house settled into silence around her. Luca had left around 3 in the morning. She'd heard his car start, heard the gravel spray as he peeled out of the driveway like a teenager having a tantrum. Good. Let him go sulk somewhere. She had work to do. By sunrise, she'd compiled a priority list of 17 items that needed immediate attention. Bank accounts, property deeds, operational oversight, shell company restructuring. The list went on, each item representing a potential weakness Luca could exploit if she didn't move fast enough. Sofia arrived at 6:30 with coffee and pastries from the Italian bakery downtown. She looked exhausted but wired, the way people do when they've witnessed something historic and can't quite process it yet. "Thought you might need this," Sofia said, setting the coffee down on the desk. "You're a saint." Alessia took a long drink, felt the caffeine hit her system. "Did your contact at the bank confirm the account transfers?" "All set. The primary operating accounts are frozen pending authorization from the new signatory. That's you, as of 7 this morning." Sofia pulled out her tablet, scrolling through notes. Luca tried to withdraw $50,000 from the personal account at 4:17 this morning. The system flagged it. "Let it go through. He'll need money to live on." Sofia looked up sharply. "You're being generous. I'm being smart. If he's completely broke, he becomes desperate. Desperate people make noise." Alessia stood, stretching muscles that had gone stiff from sitting too long. "Let him have enough to feel like he has options. It'll keep him quiet while we clean up his mess." Speaking of mess, Vincent called. "He wants to meet this morning. Says there's something you need to see at the construction office." Alicia checked her watch. Almost 7. "Tell him I'll be there by 9. What else?" "Domenico's daughter sent over the full audit. You were right about the skimming. Luca's been pulling money out of the East Side operations for about 18 months. Small amounts at first, then bigger. Total comes to just over 200,000. Document it all. We're not prosecuting, but I want everyone to know exactly why this happened." Alessia moved to the window, watching the sun come up over the garden. The roses needed pruning. She'd have to hire someone. Add it to the list. "Any word from the Castellanos?" "Isabella called around 5. She wants lunch today. Said to tell you congratulations and that she's never seen anyone castrate a man that efficiently without drawing blood." Despite everything, Alessia smiled. "I like her. She's terrifying. That's why I like her." Alessia turned back to the desk, to the mountain of work ahead. "Clear my afternoon. After I meet with Vincent, I want to see Domenico and then Isabella. We need to get everyone aligned on the new structure before the rumors start spinning out of control." "They're already spinning. My phone's been buzzing since midnight. Everyone wants to know if it's true, if you really took over, if Luca's dead." "Is that actually going around? That he's dead?" 3 different people asked me if you had him killed." Alessia rubbed her temples. "Perfect. Exactly what we need. Call the usual media contacts. Get ahead of this. The story is, Luca De Rossi is stepping back from active leadership due to health concerns. I'm taking over operational control with his full support. Everything's fine, business as usual, no drama." "You want me to lie?" "I want you to manage the narrative. There's a difference." Alessia gathered her files, shoving them into her bag. "And find out where Luca went last night. I want to know where he's staying, who he's talking to." Sofia made a note. "You really think he'll try something?" "I think he's humiliated and angry and not particularly smart when he's emotional. So yes, I think he'll try something. We just need to make sure whatever he tries is small enough that it doesn't matter." The drive to the construction office took 40 minutes through morning traffic. Alessia used the time to return calls, reassure nervous associates, and project a calm she didn't entirely feel. The takeover had been clean, but clean didn't mean easy. There would be pushback. There would be people testing her, waiting to see if she'd crack under pressure. She couldn't crack. Not even a little. Vincent was waiting in his office when she arrived, looking like he hadn't slept either. He'd been with the organization for 23 years, starting as a union organizer before Luca brought him in to handle the construction side. He was steady, competent, and, most importantly, uninterested in playing power games. "Thanks for coming," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Coffee?" "I'm already vibrating from Sofia's espresso. What do you need to show me?" Vincent pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. "Contracts from the Riverside Development Project. Luca signed off on these about 6 months ago. Alessia opened the folder, scanning the documents. Construction contracts, supplier agreements, permit applications. Everything looked standard until she got to the payment schedules. These numbers are wrong. Yeah, he approved payments that are 30% over market rate for everything: labor, materials, permits. She looked up. Who got the contracts? Mostly companies owned by Carlo Messina. The name landed like a stone. Carlo Messina ran a smaller organization on the south side, trafficking mostly in drugs and protection rackets. He was ambitious, not particularly bright, and had been trying to expand his territory for years. Luca was paying him off, Alessia said slowly, through the construction contracts. That's what it looks like. Messina's companies do the work, but they charge premium rates and kick back part of the difference to Luca, off the books. How much are we talking? Best estimate? Around 400,000 over the life of the project, maybe more. Alicia closed the folder, feeling a headache building behind her eyes. This is fraud. If the city auditors catch this, it doesn't just burn Luca, it burns all of us. I know. That's why I wanted you to see it right away. Do we have documentation showing Luca approved these personally? His signature's on every contract. Good. That was good. It meant she could contain this, make it clear that the problem was Luca's personal corruption, not systemic organizational failure. Okay, here's what we do. Halt all payments on the Riverside project effective immediately. Site budget review. Then bring in an independent auditor, someone clean, someone with no connection to us, and have them go through everything. When they find the inflated costs, we renegotiate the contracts at fair market rates. Messina's going to scream. Let him. He was complicit in defrauding our organization. If he makes noise, we make it very clear that we have documentation of his participation in a kickback scheme. Alicia stood, pacing. Actually, better idea. I'll talk to him myself. Vincent looked alarmed. That's not... Are you sure that's a good idea? Messina's a small-timer who thought he could play in the big leagues because Luca was sloppy. I'm going to explain to him exactly how much trouble he's in, and then I'm going to give him a choice. Cooperate quietly, and we forget this happened, or fight us and we bury him. He might not take you seriously. Then he's stupider than I thought. Alessia picked up her bag. Set up a meeting, today if possible, somewhere neutral, and make sure he knows it's not optional. She left Vincent looking unsettled and drove across town to meet with Domenico. The East Side operations were headquartered in an old warehouse that had been converted into offices, the kind of place that looked abandoned from the outside, but hummed with activity once you got past the security. Domenico was in the back office, reviewing inventory sheets with his daughter Maria. He looked up when Alessia entered, his expression carefully neutral. Heard you had an interesting night, he said. Productive. Alessia took a seat without being invited. Power move, small but important. I wanted to thank you for your support last night. It mattered. You earned it. Luca was getting sloppy. Bad for business. Speaking of business, Maria, thank you for the audit. The numbers were very helpful. Maria nodded. She was 32, quiet, and had a mind for finances that would have made her fortune on Wall Street if she'd gone that route instead of into the family business. There's more, if you want it. I want everything, every inconsistency, every questionable expense, every dollar that doesn't add up. Alessia leaned forward. I'm cleaning house. That means total transparency with the people I trust. You two are on that list, but I need to know I can count on you going forward. Domenico studied her for a long moment. What are you offering? Better margins, more autonomy, and a seat at the table when decisions get made. Alessia pulled out a folder, slid it across to him. This is the new operational structure. You keep running the East Side, but you report directly to me. No intermediaries, no buffer. You have a problem, you tell me. You see an opportunity, you bring it to me first. And in return, I don't skim your profits for personal expenses. I don't override your decisions without cause. And I treat you like the professional you are, instead of a subordinate who exists to take orders. Maria and Domenico exchanged a look. Some kind of silent communication that Alessia couldn't quite read. We heard Luca's threatening to fight back, Maria said carefully. That he's talking to people, trying to rebuild support. Let him talk. He doesn't have the resources or the credibility anymore. Alicia kept her voice level. But if he approaches either of you, I need to know immediately. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I need to know what story he's selling. You think people will believe him? Domenico asked. I think some people will want to believe him because the alternative is admitting a woman played them all. Human nature. Alessia stood. But I'm not worried about people's egos. I'm worried about keeping operations running smoothly and profitably. If Luca becomes a problem, we'll handle it. Until then, he's just noise. She left them with the new organizational structure and drove to lunch with Isabella Castellano at an upscale restaurant near the waterfront. Isabella was already seated when Alicia arrived, a glass of wine in front of her and a satisfied expression on her face. The woman of the hour, Isabella said as Alessia sat down. I've had 12 calls this morning about you. Everyone wants to know if you're really in charge or if this was some elaborate performance art. What did you tell them? That you're in charge and anyone who doubts it is welcome to test you and find out how quickly you'll make them regret it. Isabella sipped her wine. You handled last night well. Clean, public, no room for interpretation. But the hard part starts now. I know. Do you? Because taking power is one thing. Keeping it is something else entirely. Luca's going to push back. So will some of the other families who don't like the precedent you're setting. You've made enemies you don't even know about yet. Then I'll deal with them when they surface. Alessia ordered water. She needed to stay sharp, and looked at Isabella directly. I didn't do this on impulse. I've been planning for 2 years. I have contingencies, I have allies, and I have documentation that'll destroy anyone who comes at me sideways. Documentation won't protect you from a bullet. No, but it'll make sure whoever fires it knows their organization dies with me. Mutually assured destruction. It's not elegant, but it's effective. Isabella smiled. You've thought about this. I think about everything. It's how I survived 13 years married to a narcissist. They ordered lunch and spent the next hour discussing territory, operations, and the delicate balance of power that kept the city's underworld from tearing itself apart. Isabella had insights from decades of experience, and she shared them freely, partly because she liked Alessia, partly because having a competent ally in the De Rossi territory was good for her own business. Tell me about Messina, Alessia said as they waited for coffee. What do you know about him? Carlo? He's ambitious and stupid, dangerous combination. Why? He's been running a kickback scheme with Luca through construction contracts. I'm meeting with him this afternoon to shut it down. Isabella's expression sharpened. Be careful with that. Messina's got a temper, and he doesn't like being told no, especially not by women. Then he's going to have a learning experience. You want backup? I can have one of my sons sit in on the meeting. Alessia considered it. There was strategic value in having Isabella's visible support, but there was also risk. If she brought muscle to the meeting, it signaled fear, and she couldn't afford to look afraid. I appreciate it, but I need to handle this myself. First meeting, first test. People are watching to see if I'm serious. Fair enough, but if he tries anything stupid, you call me. Messina's been a thorn in my side for years. I'd be happy to have an excuse to remind him why he should stay in his lane. By the time Alessia left the restaurant, it was almost 3. Sophia had texted confirming the meeting with Messina, 4 o'clock at a coffee shop in neutral territory. Public enough to discourage violence, private enough for honest conversation. Alessia drove there alone, despite Sophia's protests. She parked down the street and walked the last 2 blocks, using the time to center herself. This was important. How she handled Messina would set the tone for how other people approached her going forward. The coffee shop was half empty, mid-afternoon lull. Messina was already there, sitting in a back booth with 2 of his guys standing nearby trying to look casual. He was in his 40s, built like a wrestler gone soft, wearing too much cologne in a suit that probably cost more than it should have. Mrs. De Rossi, he said, not standing. Wasn't expecting you personally. Call me Alessia. She slid into the booth across from him, ignoring the muscle. Thank you for meeting on short notice. Didn't seem like I had much choice. Your people made it sound urgent. It is. We've discovered some irregularities in the Riverside construction project. Specifically, we've found that your companies have been billing us at rates significantly above market value. Messina's expression didn't change. Market value is subjective. Quality work costs money. Quality work? Yes. Fraud? No. Alessia pulled out her tablet, turned it so he could see. These are comparable contracts from other projects. Same work, same materials, same timeline. Your rates are 30 to 40% higher across the board. The only explanation is that you and my husband had an arrangement where you inflated costs and kicked back the difference. That's a serious accusation. It's a documented fact. I have contracts, payment records, and email correspondence between you and Luca discussing the specifics. She hadn't found emails yet, but she was betting they existed and that Messina wouldn't know whether she was bluffing. So here's the situation. You've been stealing from my organization. That's a problem. I had a deal with Luca. Luca doesn't make deals anymore. I do. Alessia leaned back, keeping her body language relaxed. Now, I could make this very ugly for you. I could go to the city auditors, show them the inflated contracts, let them start an investigation that would probably uncover other problems in your business. Or I could make this easy. Easy how? You renegotiate the Riverside contracts at fair market rates. You return half of the excess payments you've already received, and you stop working with my organization entirely. Messina's face darkened. You're cutting me out? I'm removing a liability. You proved you can't be trusted when you participated in defrauding us. So we're done. Take the deal, or I bury you. Your choice. One of the muscle guys shifted, and Alessia caught movement in her peripheral vision. Sophia, sitting at a table near the window with her phone out, recording, and probably armed. Messina saw it too. He sat back, jaw tight. This is because I'm a man, isn't it? You need to prove something. This is because you stole from me. Your gender is irrelevant. Alessia stood. You have until Monday to decide. Renegotiate and refund or deal with the auditors. I genuinely don't care which you choose, but if you pick the second option, understand that I'll make sure everyone knows why. You'll be the cautionary tale I use to explain what happens to people who think they can cheat me. She walked out without waiting for an answer. Sophia followed 30 seconds later, catching up as Alessia reached her car. That went well, Sophia said dryly. He'll fold. Men like Messina are bullies. They understand strength. Alessia unlocked her car, slid into the driver's seat. Where's Luca? Hotel downtown, the Meridian. He's been there since last night. Made a few calls, ordered room service, nothing dramatic. Keep eyes on him. I want to know if that changes. The rest of the day was a blur of meetings and phone calls. By the time Alessia got home, it was after midnight and she was running on fumes and caffeine. The house was dark and empty. Luca's absence more noticeable now than it had been when he was actually there. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat in the living room with all the lights off, letting the exhaustion catch up to her. This was it. The new reality. She'd done what she'd set out to do, taken control, proven she could. But Isabella was right. Keeping power was harder than taking it. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You made a mistake. Alessia stared at the screen, feeling ice settle in her stomach. The number was blocked, but the implication was clear. Someone wasn't happy. She forwarded the text to Sophia with a message. Trace this. And upgrade security on the house. Tomorrow, she'd deal with whoever sent it. Tonight, she needed sleep, but sleep didn't come. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios. Who would threaten her directly? Luca seemed too obvious. Messina was possible but unlikely. He was a coward who preferred indirect confrontation. Someone else then. Someone who felt threatened by the change in power structure. At 2 a.m, her phone rang. Sophia. We've got a problem, Sophia said without preamble. The Riverside construction site. Someone set a fire, small one, contained, but definitely arson. Alessia sat up, already reaching for clothes. Anyone hurt? Night security guard has smoke inhalation. He'll be fine, but this was a message. Messina. That'd be my guess. Or someone working for him. I'm on my way. The construction site was still smoking when Alicia arrived. Fire trucks were pulling away, and the security guard was sitting in an ambulance being treated by paramedics. The damage looked minimal. Someone had set fire to a stack of lumber near the main building, more symbolic than destructive. Vincent was there, looking grim. This is because of your meeting with Messina. Probably. Alessia walked the perimeter, examining the scene. The fire had been set with gasoline based on the smell. Amateur hour. Get me a meeting with him, tomorrow morning, and this time I'm bringing backup. You sure you want to escalate? He already escalated. Now I'm responding. Alessia pulled out her phone, dialed Isabella. It rang 4 times before she answered, voice thick with sleep. This better be important. Messina just firebombed my construction site. I need to send a message that this doesn't happen again. You offered help. I'm accepting. There was a pause, then Isabella's voice came back sharp and awake. What do you need? Sit in on a meeting tomorrow morning. Just be there. Your presence will make the point. Done. Where and when? Alessia looked at Vincent, who mouthed 9 o'clock. 9. I'll text you the location. See you there. Alessia ended the call and turned to find Sophia approaching with a tablet. Security footage from the gate camera. Got a partial plate on the car that dropped off the arsonist. Can we trace it? Already running it. Should have something in a few hours. Good. When we know who it was, I want them found. Not hurt, just found. I want them to know we know. Alessia looked back at the smoldering lumber. And I want extra security on all our sites. Armed, visible. Make it clear that we're not playing defense anymore. By the time the sun came up, Alessia had been awake for almost 24 hours. She went home, showered, changed into a black suit that meant business, and drove to the meeting location, a warehouse owned by Isabella's family, neutral ground that carried the weight of Castellano presence. Messina arrived at 9:05, clearly trying to demonstrate that he wasn't intimidated. He walked in with his usual 2 guys and stopped short when he saw Isabella sitting at the table next to Alessia. Mrs. Castellano, he said carefully, didn't know you'd be here. Alessia invited me. Sit down, Carlo. He sat. The power dynamics in the room had shifted dramatically with Isabella's presence, and everyone knew it. Last night, Alessia began, someone set fire to my construction site. Small fire, minimal damage, but the intent was clear. It was a message. I heard about that terrible thing. Vandalism's a real problem in this city. Cut the performance. You did it because you're angry about our conversation yesterday. You thought you could scare me into backing down. Alessia slid a photograph across the table. This is a still from our security footage. The car that dropped off your arsonist. We have the plate. We have the registration. We have the name of the driver, who happens to work for one of your companies. Messina's face went carefully blank. Now, I could take this to the police, Alessia continued, but that would be messy and public and would hurt both of us. Or I could handle it privately. Which would you prefer? What do you want? I want you to understand that threatening me was the stupidest thing you've ever done. I want you to return 100% of the excess payments, not half, all of it. And I want you to stay so far away from my operations that if I even hear your name in connection with my business, I will assume you're coming at me again, and I will respond accordingly. That's non-negotiable, Isabella interrupted. Carlo, you're a small operation trying to play in big leagues. You got greedy, you got caught, and now you're making it worse by lashing out like a child. Take the deal Alessia's offering and consider yourself lucky she doesn't have you buried in a hole somewhere. The threat was casual, almost conversational, which made it more effective. Messina looked between them, calculating his options, and finding none that didn't end badly for him. Fine, he said finally. You'll have the money by end of week. Tomorrow, Alessia corrected. End of business tomorrow. Wire transfer. And if anything else happens to any of my properties, I won't bother with another meeting. I'll just assume you're a problem that needs permanent solving. They stared at each other across the table. Messina blinked first. Tomorrow, he agreed. After he left, Isabella poured herself coffee from a thermos she'd brought. That boy's going to be trouble eventually. You know that, right? I know, but not today. Alessia accepted a cup, grateful. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the entertainment. I haven't watched someone get verbally castrated that efficiently in years. Isabella studied her. You look exhausted. Haven't slept much. Go home. Get some rest. You can't run an empire if you collapse from exhaustion. There's too much to do. There's always too much to do. That's why you delegate. Isabella stood, gathering her things. You've proven your point. You're in charge. You're serious, and you don't back down. Now take a breath before something else catches fire. Alicia drove home in a daze, let herself into the empty house, and made it as far as the couch before everything caught up to her. She woke up 6 hours later to her phone ringing. Sophia, please tell me nothing's on fire, Alicia said by way of greeting. Nothing's on fire, but we've got confirmation on the text message from last night. Traced it to a burner phone, but we cross-referenced the cell tower location with known associates and got a hit. Who? Marco. Alessia sat up, suddenly very awake. Marco. Luca's right-hand man. The one who'd always seemed too stupid to be dangerous. You're sure? The phone pinged from a tower near his apartment, and we pulled his phone records. He made 3 calls to Luca in the past 24 hours. They're planning something. Of course they are. Alicia stood, pacing. What do we know about Marco's current position? He's been with Luca since the beginning, loyal to a fault. Not particularly bright, but competent enough at enforcement work. He's probably feeling threatened by the change in leadership. Threatened enough to do something stupid? I'd say yes, based on that text message. Alessia thought for a moment. Marco wasn't the real problem. Luca was. Marco was just a symptom of the larger issue, which was that Luca hadn't accepted defeat yet. He was still out there, wounded and angry, trying to find a way back. Bring Marco in, Alessia said. Not violently. Just have someone invite him for a conversation, today, and find out exactly what Luca's telling people. By evening, Marco was sitting in the same warehouse where they'd met with Messina. He looked nervous, which was smart of him. Alessia sat down across from him, Sophia standing behind her like a shadow. You sent me a threatening text message last night. I don't know what you're... Don't. We traced it. We have your phone records. We know you've been talking to Luca. So let's skip the part where you lie and get to the part where you tell me what you want. Marco swallowed hard. Luca's the rightful boss. You can't just take over like that. I already did. The question is whether you're smart enough to accept it or if you're going to keep making problems for yourself. He built this organization. No, I built it. He was the face. There's a difference. Alessia leaned forward. Marco, I've known you for 10 years. You're loyal. That's admirable. But you're being loyal to the wrong version of Luca. The man you followed would never have made the mistakes he's been making. He's not that person anymore. That's not true. He spent $200,000 of operational funds on personal expenses. He approved fraudulent contracts that exposed us to criminal investigations. He had affairs that made him vulnerable to blackmail. Those aren't the actions of someone capable of leading. Alessia softened her tone slightly. You're afraid of change. I get that. But I'm offering you the same thing I offered Domenico and Vincent, a place in the new structure if you can accept it. And if I can't, then you leave. No violence, no retaliation. You just go. But you don't get to stay and undermine me. That's not an option. Marco was quiet for a long time, staring at the table. When he finally looked up, he looked older somehow, tired. What would I do? Under the new structure. Same thing you've always done. Security oversight, personnel management. You're good at those things. I need someone who knows the operational side. Alessia pulled out a folder. This is the proposed structure. Your responsibilities, your compensation, your chain of command. Read it. Think about it. You have 24 hours to decide. She left him there with the folder and walked out into the cool evening air. Sophia followed, unusually quiet. You think he'll take it? Sophia asked. Honestly, I don't know. But I had to give him the option. Otherwise, I'm just creating enemies unnecessarily. And if he goes back to Luca? Then we'll know Luca's still trying to build a resistance, which is useful information. Alessia got into her car, suddenly feeling every hour of lost sleep. I'm going home. If anything explodes, call me. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow. The house was still empty, still quiet. Alessia poured herself a drink and stood at the window, looking out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, Luca was planning his next move. Somewhere out there, people were deciding whether to support her or oppose her. She'd known it would be like this. Taking power wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was a series of small victories and careful navigation. It was exhausting and relentless, and there was no room for mistakes. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marco. I'm in. Alessia felt something loosen in her chest. One more piece secured. One less enemy to worry about. She finished her drink and went upstairs, finally allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was actually going to work. The first week passed in a controlled chaos that Alicia managed through sheer force of will and approximately 4 hours of sleep per night. Marco proved useful, more useful than she'd expected, actually. He knew where all the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively, and once he'd committed to the new regime, he committed fully. Turned out loyalty was just loyalty, regardless of who it was directed toward. Messina transferred the money. Every penny, plus an extra 20,000 that Alicia suspected was meant as an apology. She took it anyway. Apologies in cash spent the same as anything else. The operational heads fell into line one by one, some enthusiastically, like Domenico, some reluctantly, like the union boss who ran their labor operations and clearly didn't love taking orders from a woman, but loved money more than he loved his prejudices. By Friday, Alicia had restructured the entire organizational chart, consolidated the command structure, and eliminated 3 redundant positions that had existed solely to give Luca's friends somewhere to collect paychecks. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on Saturday morning at 6:15 when Sofia called with an edge in her voice that Alessia had learned to recognize as very bad news. "Luca's gone," Sofia said. Alessia was already getting dressed, phone wedged between her shoulder and ear. "Gone where?" "That's the problem. He checked out of the Meridian yesterday afternoon, told the front desk he was leaving town, but his car's still in the hotel garage, and none of our contacts have seen him since. He's not leaving town. He's going underground." Alessia grabbed her keys. "Who's he been talking to?" "That's the other problem. We lost track of his communications 2 days ago. He ditched his phone, the one we were monitoring, and probably got a burner. Smart Money says he's meeting with people we don't know about." Alessia's mind raced through possibilities. Luca going quiet wasn't random. He was planning something. The question was what and with whom, and how much damage he could do before she stopped him. Pull records on anyone who visited him at the hotel. Credit card transactions, security footage, everything. And reach out to our police contacts. If Luca's meeting with anyone official, I want to know. Already on it. But Alessia, if he's talking to the feds, then we have bigger problems than a bruised ego. Alessia ended the call and drove to the office, which was really just a converted brownstone in a respectable neighborhood where they handled the legitimate side of the business. She found Sofia already there with 3 laptops open and enough coffee to fuel a small army. "Tell me something good," Alessia said. Luca had 4 visitors at the hotel over the past week. 2 were women. One was Gianna, the other we don't recognize. Young, blonde, could be another girlfriend or could be something else. The other 2 were men. One we ID'd as Anthony Russo. The name hit like a punch. Anthony Russo was a federal prosecutor who'd been building cases against organized crime for 15 years. He was smart, relentless, and had put away 3 major players in the past decade. "When?" Alessia asked quietly. 3 days ago. Met in the hotel bar, talked for 20 minutes, left separately. 20 minutes isn't enough time to cut a deal. No, but it's enough time to discuss the possibility of one. Sofia pulled up a grainy security photo showing Luca and Russo sitting at a corner table. We don't have audio, but the body language suggests negotiation. Luca's leaning in, engaged. Russo's listening, but not committing to anything. Alessia studied the photo, feeling ice spread through her chest. This was the nightmare scenario. Luca, desperate and angry, trading information to the feds in exchange for immunity or protection. He knew enough to burn the entire organization if he talked. "The other man?" she asked. "Still working on it. Facial recognition didn't get a hit, which means he's either nobody or somebody who knows how to stay off databases. Keep trying. I want to know everyone Luca's been in contact with." Alessia paced to the window, thinking. If he's talking to Russo, he's building leverage, probably trying to use it to force me out. The threat is that if I don't step down, he goes to the feds with everything. Would he actually do it? Burn his own empire? A week ago, I would have said no. Now? Alessia turned back to face Sofia. He's humiliated. His wife took everything from him in front of everyone who matters. Men like Luca don't process that rationally. They process it like betrayal, and they want revenge more than they want survival. So what do? We make sure he has nothing to trade. Start moving the sensitive documentation. Everything that could be used as evidence, transfer it to secure locations he doesn't know about. Scrub the digital files. And reach out to our lawyers. I want to know exactly what kind of immunity deal Russo could offer and what it would take to invalidate it. Sophia made notes, fingers flying across her keyboard. This is going to take time. If Luca's already talking, then we're already compromised and we deal with it. But I'm not giving up what I built because my ex-husband can't handle being irrelevant. Alicia grabbed her bag. I'm going to talk to someone who might have insight into what Russo's thinking. Keep me updated on any developments. The someone turned out to be David Chen, a defense attorney who'd represented several major organized crime figures and had a reputation for being both brilliant and morally flexible. He kept an office in a high-rise downtown, all glass and steel and expensive art that screamed legitimate success. Mrs. DeRossi, he said when his assistant showed her in. I have to say I was surprised to get your call. Last I heard, your husband handled all the legal matters. My husband and I have separated our interests. I'm handling my own affairs now. Alessia took the offered seat, noting the way Chen's eyes sharpened with interest. He was early 50s, graying at the temples, and had the kind of practiced neutrality that came from years of hearing confessions from criminals. I see. And what can I do for you? I need information about Anthony Russo. Specifically, what kind of deals he typically offers cooperating witnesses. Chen leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. That's a very specific question. Should I assume your husband is considering cooperation? You should assume I need to understand my exposure and plan accordingly. Fair enough. Russo's a hard bargain. He doesn't give immunity easily, and when he does, he extracts maximum value. Testimony, documentation, wired meetings. He wants everything before he even considers a deal. And even then, he prefers plea agreements over full immunity. What about witness protection? Possible, but unlikely unless the witness can deliver multiple targets. Russo's ambitious. He wants organizations, not just individuals. Chen paused. May I speak frankly? Please. If your husband is talking to Russo, you're in serious danger, not physically. The feds won't let anything happen to a potential witness. But legally, financially, operationally, Russo will use whatever information he gets to build cases that'll take years to unwind. The best defense is to make sure your husband has nothing valuable to trade. I'm already working on that. Good. But you should also consider the personal angle. If your husband testifies against you specifically, that's a different category of problem. Spousal testimony is complicated, but if you're legally separated or divorced, we're not. Yet. Alessia had been avoiding that particular piece of paperwork, though she wasn't sure why. Sentiment, maybe. Or just not wanting to add one more thing to her endless list of tasks. You might want to expedite that. It won't prevent him from testifying entirely, but it gives you some protection, especially if the separation happened before any alleged criminal activity. Alessia made a mental note to call a divorce attorney. One more piece to manage, one more fire to put out. She thanked Chen and left, driving aimlessly for a while just to think. The city looked different now that she was responsible for all of it. Every corner, every building, every street represented territory she had to protect. It was exhausting. Her phone rang. Isabella. I heard Luca's in the wind, Isabella said without preamble. Should I be concerned? He met with a federal prosecutor 3 days ago. I'm managing it. Managing it how? By making sure he has nothing to trade and by preparing for the possibility that he tries anyway. Alicia pulled over, not wanting to have this conversation while driving. Have you heard anything from your contacts? Nothing concrete, but there's talk. People wondering if the DeRossi organization is stable, if you can actually hold it together. I've held it together for 10 years. The only difference is now people know I was doing it. The difference, Isabella said carefully, is that people are nervous. Change makes them nervous. And when people get nervous, they do stupid things, like talking to their own lawyers about immunity deals or reaching out to rival families about shifting alliances. Are you warning me about something specific? I'm warning you that you're in the vulnerable period right now. You took power, but you haven't fully consolidated it. That's when people test you. That's when the knives come out. Isabella paused. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to prepare you. The next few weeks will determine whether this transition sticks or falls apart. Then I'll make sure it sticks. Good. Call me if you need anything. And Alessia, watch your back. Luca's not the only person who might want to see you fail. The call ended, leaving Alicia sitting in her car on a side street, feeling the weight of everything pressing down. She'd known this would be hard. She'd planned for it, but planning and living through it were different things. She drove to the house, her house, and found Marco waiting in the driveway. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "We need to talk," he said. Alessia's guard went up immediately. "About what?" "Luca called me this morning from a blocked number." The ice was back, spreading through her veins. "What did he say?" "He wanted to know if I was really on your side, or if I was just waiting for the right moment to switch back. He said you're going to get arrested, that you're in over your head, that I should get out before you drag everyone down with you." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I made my choice and he should accept his situation." Marco met her eyes. "But he's not going to accept it." He sounded unhinged, like he's got nothing left to lose. "He doesn't. That's what makes him dangerous." Alessia unlocked the front door, gestured for Marco to follow. Inside, she poured them both drinks, whiskey, neat, and sat down heavily. "Did he say anything specific about what he's planning?" "No, but he mentioned that you're not as protected as you think, that you've made enemies you don't know about." Marco took a drink. "I think he's trying to build a coalition against you. People who lost status when you took over. People who don't like the new structure. He's looking for anyone who'll help him take you down." "Then we need to identify those people before he reaches them." Alessia pulled out her phone, started making a list. "Who lost the most when I restructured?" "Tony Vaccaro. You cut his department budget by 40%. Because he was running a slush fund and pocketing the difference." "Anyone else?" "The Moreno brothers. You shut down their sports betting operation." "Because it was hemorrhaging money and attracting police attention." "Next." They went through the list, identifying potential weak points. By the time they finished, Alessia had 12 names, 12 people who might be receptive to Luca's pitch, who might see helping him as a way to regain lost ground. "I'll reach out to each of them," Marco said. "Feel them out. See if anyone's been in contact with Luca. Be subtle about it. I don't want to create paranoia." "Understood." Marco stood, then hesitated. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. The organization was dying under Luca. He just couldn't see it." "Thanks, that means something." After Marco left, Alessia spent the rest of the day making calls and sending carefully worded messages. She reached out to the 12 names on her list, offering small concessions and listening for any hint that they'd been talking to Luca. Most seemed genuinely surprised by her personal attention. A few were defensive. None admitted to any contact with her ex-husband, but she hadn't expected them to. By evening, she was exhausted and no closer to finding Luca. He'd gone to ground effectively, and without knowing where he was or who he was talking to, she was fighting shadows. Sophia called at 8. "Got an ID on the second man from the hotel. His name's Eric Paulson, private investigator, former FBI, specializes in financial crimes." "Luca hired an investigator?" "Looks like it. Paulson's been pulling corporate records, bank statements, property transfers, anything he can access legally. He's building a file." "On me?" "On the organization. But yeah, you're going to be in there." Sophia sounded tired. "This is bad, Alessia. If Paulson's good, and his reputation says he is, he'll find things. Things that could be problematic even without federal involvement. Then we need to know what he's finding before Luca does." Alessia thought for a moment. "Can we get to Paulson? Offer him more money to work for us instead?" "Doubtful. Guy's reputation is built on discretion. Switching clients mid-investigation would destroy that." "What about his findings? Can we access them?" "Not legally." "I didn't ask if it was legal. I asked if it was possible." There was a pause. Then Sophia said quietly, "It's possible, but risky. If we get caught breaking into a PI's office or files, that's a crime Russo would love to add to whatever else he's building. Everything's risky right now. The question is, which risk is more manageable?" Alessia made a decision. "Set it up. I want to know what Paulson has, and I want to know before Luca uses it against us." "Understood. I'll need a few days to plan it properly." "You have 2. And Sophia, keep this quiet. Just you and people you absolutely trust." After the call ended, Alessia sat in the dark house, drink in hand, wondering when exactly she'd crossed the line from defensive maneuvering to active crime. Then again, that line had probably been crossed years ago. She was just paying closer attention now. The weekend passed slowly. Alicia worked through files, reorganized operations, and tried to project calm confidence, while internally she felt like she was juggling grenades. Isabella called twice, checking in. Vincent stopped by with reports. Domenico sent updates via text. Everyone was functioning, but there was an undercurrent of tension that suggested people were waiting for something to break. On Monday morning, it did. Alessia was in a meeting with the union boss, a man named Frank, who smelled like cigars and talked like a dock worker despite having a law degree from Yale, when Sophia burst in without knocking. "We have a problem," she said. Frank looked offended at the interruption, but Alicia was already standing. "Excuse me, Frank. We'll finish this later." She followed Sophia to the hallway. "What happened?" "Raid. The feds hit 3 of our properties this morning. The shipping warehouse, the construction office, and the restaurant we use for meetings." Alicia's stomach dropped. Russo. Has to be. The timing's too perfect. They're looking for something specific. Did they find anything? Don't know yet. Marco's at the warehouse now. He says they're being thorough, going through everything. Tell him not to interfere, let them do their job. If we obstruct, that's just more charges. Alessia's mind was racing. What about the documentation we moved? Did they get to any of the secure locations? No, those weren't hit, just the main operational sites, which meant Luca had given them those addresses specifically. He knew where the main offices were, but not where Alicia had moved the sensitive materials. Small victory, but she'd take it. Get our lawyers on site at all 3 locations. I want documentation of what they take, what they see, everything, and reach out to our police contacts. I want to know if this is a full investigation or just a fishing expedition. The rest of the day was damage control. The lawyers reported that the feds had taken computers, files, and several boxes of what appeared to be financial records. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to be concerning. More importantly, the raid sent a message. Russo was serious, and he had enough evidence to justify search warrants. By evening, Alicia had confirmed through back channels that Russo was indeed building a RICO case, Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, the nuclear option of federal prosecution. If he could prove a pattern of criminal activity, he could potentially seize assets, freeze accounts, and send everyone involved to prison for decades. The question was whether Luca had given him enough to make it stick. Alessia called an emergency meeting of the operational heads that night. They gathered at Isabella's warehouse, neutral ground that hadn't been raided and therefore felt safer than their usual spots. By now you've all heard about the federal raids, Alicia began, looking at the assembled faces. Domenico, Vincent, Marco, Frank the union boss, and 3 others who ran various aspects of the operation. I want to be clear about what's happening and what we're doing about it. "We're going to jail is what's happening," Tony Vaccaro said. He was the one whose budget she'd cut, and his expression suggested he was enjoying this disaster. "You pissed off Luca, and now he's burning us all down." "Luca's talking to the feds," Alicia confirmed. "But talking and proving are different things. The raids this morning were intimidation tactics. They took files, but most of what they took is legitimate business documentation. The actual incriminating evidence was moved weeks ago to locations they don't know about." "So we're safe?" Domenico asked. "We're safer, but not safe." Alessia pulled out a folder, distributed copies. "These are the protocols we're implementing immediately. All communications go through encrypted channels only. No discussion of business over regular phones or email. All sensitive documentation gets destroyed or moved to secure locations within 48 hours. And everyone here needs to consult with a lawyer about potential exposure." "You're asking us to prepare for prosecution," Vincent said quietly. "I'm asking you to be smart. Russo's building a case. Whether it goes anywhere depends on what evidence he can actually gather and whether any of you decide to cooperate with him." She paused, letting that sink in. "I won't lie to you. This is serious. But it's manageable if we stay unified. The moment someone breaks ranks and starts talking, we all go down. So I need to know right now if anyone in this room is considering making a deal." Silence. They all looked at each other, calculating. Finally, Frank spoke up. "What about Luca? If he's already talking, the damage is done." "Luca knows a lot, but he doesn't know everything. And more importantly, he's a compromised witness. He has a personal vendetta against me, which any competent defense attorney will use to destroy his credibility. Russo knows that, which is why he's looking for corroboration. He needs evidence that supports Luca's testimony. And if he finds it, then we fight it in court. We have good lawyers, we have resources, and we have the fact that most of our recent operations have been legitimately structured. Alicia looked around the table. I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking you to trust the system we built. It's designed to withstand exactly this kind of pressure. Tony leaned back, arms crossed. And if the system fails, if one of us ends up in handcuffs, then we protect each other. No one talks. No one makes individual deals. We handle it together. She met his eyes directly. You don't like me, Tony. I get it. You think I overstepped, that I don't belong in this chair. Fine. But like me or not, I'm the one standing between you and a RICO conviction. So you can either work with me, or you can take your chances alone. Your choice. The challenge hung in the air. Tony stared at her for a long moment, then looked away. Concession, grudging, but real. We're with you, Domenico said. At least until we see how this plays out. It wasn't the ringing endorsement Alessia had hoped for, but it was enough. For now. The meeting broke up around midnight. Alessia stayed behind with Isabella, who'd been observing from the corner with her usual inscrutable expression. That could have gone worse, Isabella said. It could have gone better. Tony's going to be a problem. He's scared, and scared men make bad decisions. I know, I'm having Marco keep an eye on him. Alessia rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. This is exactly what Luca wanted. To create chaos, make people doubt me, fracture the organization. And it's working. Then you need to hit back. Show them you're not just defending. Show them you're still in control. How? The feds are crawling all over our operations. If I make any aggressive moves right now, it just gives Russo more ammunition. Not aggressive, strategic. Isabella stood, poured 2 glasses of cognac from a bottle on the shelf. You need a win. Something visible that reminds people why you're in charge. What's the biggest problem facing the organization right now, aside from Luca? Alessia thought about it. The South Side territory. We've been losing ground to the Ricci family for 6 months. They've been moving in on our protection rackets, undercutting our prices. So, take it back, publicly. Make it clear that federal investigation or not, you're still running things. That could get messy. Messy sends a message. Right now your people are wondering if you're too afraid to act. Show them you're not. Isabella handed her the cognac. The Riccis have been getting bold because they think you're vulnerable. Prove them wrong, and you prove it to everyone watching. It was risky. But Isabella was right. Alessia needed to show strength, not just competence. She needed people to remember that she wasn't just an administrator. She was a leader. I'll talk to Marco, she said. See what kind of operation we can put together. Make it clean. Make it effective. And make sure everyone knows who gave the order. Alessia left the warehouse feeling more focused than she had in days. The feds were a problem, but they were a long-term problem. Right now, she needed to handle the immediate threats to her authority. She called Marco on the drive home. I need you to put together a team. Small, discreet, effective. We're taking back the South Side. When? This week. And Marco? I don't want this sloppy. No bodies, no property damage that'll attract attention. Just a clear message that the territory belongs to us, and anyone who thinks otherwise is making a mistake. Understood. I'll put together a plan and run it by you tomorrow. The next morning, Alicia met with her divorce attorney, a woman named Patricia, who had a reputation for being ruthless in family court. They spent 2 hours going through the paperwork required to legally separate from Luca. Given the circumstances, Patricia said, I'd recommend we file immediately. The longer you wait, the more complicated it gets, especially with federal investigation involved. Do it. And Patricia, I want this airtight. No loopholes he can use to claim marital assets or privilege. Already on it. We'll file by end of day. One more piece in place, one more vulnerability closed off. Sophia called at noon with an update on the Paulson situation. We have access. My contact got into his office last night, copied everything on his computer. And it's bad. He's got financial records going back 7 years, transaction histories, shell company documents, property transfers. If Russo gets all of this, he can trace every dollar and tie it back to illegal activity. Can we neutralize it? Not easily. The documents exist in other places too, but knowing what Paulson has means we can prepare defenses, create alternate explanations for the transactions, muddy the water. Do it. and get our financial people on this. I want clean explanations for everything Paulson found, no matter how creative we have to get. By Wednesday, Marco had a plan for the South Side operation. They met in the early morning at a diner off the highway, sitting in a back booth with coffee neither of them touched. 3 locations, Marco said, keeping his voice low. The Ricci's have guys stationed at a social club, a garage, and a bar. Small crews, mostly young guys trying to prove themselves. We hit all 3 simultaneously, fast and clean. No weapons drawn unless they draw first. We just walk in, make it clear the territory's ours, and walk out. What's the message? That protection in this neighborhood costs what we say it costs, and anyone collecting on behalf of the Ricci's needs to find other employment. Do it tomorrow night, late, when the streets are quiet. And Marco, I want you leading this personally. I need someone I trust making sure it doesn't escalate. You got it. The operation went exactly as planned. Marco and his team hit all 3 locations within a 15-minute window. There were no injuries, no shots fired, just a very clear demonstration that the De Rossi organization was still operational and still in control. By Friday morning, word had spread through the South Side that the territory was back under Alicia's authority. It was a small victory, but it was visible. And visibility mattered. Vincent called her that afternoon. Heard about the South Side. That was bold. Necessary? Tony's not happy about it. Says you're escalating when you should be lying low. Tony can file a complaint with HR. Alicia was getting tired of Tony's second guessing. What's the situation with the construction sites? Back to normal. The auditors finished their review. Everything came back clean, which is helping with the city contracts. Good. Keep me posted if anything changes. She spent the weekend working through files and preparing for what she was increasingly certain would be an indictment. The lawyer said it could take months for Russo to build his case, but Alessia didn't trust timelines. She'd learned that things happened when you least expected them, and the only defense was to be prepared for everything. On Sunday evening, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, then reconsidered. Yes? Alessia. Luca's voice strained and rough. We need to talk. She felt her whole body go tense. I don't think we have anything to say to each other. I'm offering you a way out. One chance. Meet with me. Hear what I have to say. So you can record the conversation and hand it to Russo? I'm not stupid, Luca. No recording. Just you and me. One conversation. After that, if you still want to fight, we fight. But at least hear me out. Every instinct told her to hang up. But curiosity won out. When and where? Tomorrow, noon. The park by the river. Public, neutral. Bring Sophia if you want. I'll come alone. You're alone now. That's your problem. He laughed, bitter. Tomorrow, Alicia. If you don't show, the offer expires. The line went dead. Alessia sat there holding the phone, wondering if this was a trap or if Luca was actually desperate enough to try negotiating. Either way, she'd find out tomorrow. She called Sophia. Luca wants to meet. Tomorrow, noon, Riverside Park. That's a terrible idea. Probably, but I'm doing it anyway. I want you there, armed, watching from a distance. If anything looks wrong, you intervene. This is how people end up dead, you know. Then make sure I'm not one of them. The park was nearly empty when Alicia arrived at 11:45. Just joggers and a woman walking 3 small dogs that yapped at everything that moved. The river looked gray under overcast skies, and a cold wind came off the water that made Alessia pull her coat tighter. Sophia was somewhere behind her, positioned with a clear line of sight. They'd gone over the plan 3 times that morning. If Luca tried anything, if anyone else showed up, if the situation felt wrong in any way, Sophia would intervene. Alessia found a bench facing the water and sat down to wait. Her phone buzzed. A text from Isabella. If you're not back by 2, I'm sending people to find you. She typed back. Appreciated. Luca appeared at 12:03, walking slowly like a man who'd aged a decade in 2 weeks. He'd lost weight. His suit hung loose on his frame, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he wasn't sleeping any better than she was. He looked diminished somehow, smaller. It should have felt like victory, but mostly it just felt sad. You came, he said, stopping a few feet from the bench. You asked me to. Sit down, Luca. You look like you're about to fall over. He sat, keeping distance between them. For a moment, neither of them spoke, just watched the river and the clouds moving overhead. "I've been staying at a motel out by the airport," Luca said finally. "One of those places that charges by the week and doesn't ask questions. There's a family next door, couple with a baby that cries all night. I lie there listening to it and thinking about how we never had kids. We talked about it. You always said later. Then later never came." "I know. I'm just saying, maybe things would have been different if we had. Maybe I wouldn't have—" He trailed off. "Wouldn't have what? Cheated? Stolen from your own organization? Turned into someone I didn't recognize?" Alessia kept her voice level. "Kids wouldn't have fixed you, Luca. Nothing was going to fix you except you deciding to be better, and you didn't want to do the work." He flinched. "That's harsh." "It's true. Why did you want to meet?" "I want to make a deal. I'm listening." Luca pulled out a folder from inside his jacket, set it on the bench between them. "Everything I gave Russo. Copies of what Paulson found, my testimony outline, the evidence they're building, all of it. I'm offering to make it go away." Alicia didn't touch the folder. "In exchange for what?" "My business back." "Not all of it. I know that ship sailed. But a piece. Let me run the West Side operations. Give me enough to live on, enough to matter, and I'll tell Russo I was mistaken, that I exaggerated, that I can't actually testify to anything criminal. You're asking me to give you power in exchange for not destroying us both. I'm asking for a compromise. You get to keep the empire. I get to keep my dignity. Everyone wins." Alessia finally picked up the folder, flipped through it. Transcripts of Luca's meetings with Russo, financial documents, organizational charts. Everything that could burn them. Her hands didn't shake, but it took effort. "This is extortion," she said quietly. "This is negotiation. There's a difference." "No, Luca. Negotiation happens between equals. This is you threatening to blow everything up because you can't handle being irrelevant." She closed the folder, set it down. "You really thought this would work? That I'd just hand you back territory because you're holding evidence over my head? I thought you'd be smart enough to see this is the best option for everyone. The best option for you. For everyone else, it's a disaster. You're unstable, you're compromised, and you've proven you'll turn on your own organization the moment things don't go your way." Alessia turned to face him fully. "If I give you the West Side, how long before you want more? How long before you decide you deserve everything back and you go to Russo again?" "I wouldn't." "You absolutely would, because that's who you are now. Someone who burns bridges and then acts surprised when there's nowhere left to stand." Luca's jaw tightened. "I built this organization. Everything you have because of me. You're sitting here acting like you did it all yourself, but we both know that's a lie. I made you. I gave you the opportunity. You gave me the opportunity to clean up your messes and fix your mistakes while you took credit and played gangster. I built the systems that actually work. I structured the operations that actually make money. You were just the face, Luca, and faces are replaceable." He stood up abruptly, fists clenched. For a second she thought he might actually hit her, and she tensed, ready to move. But he just stood there, breathing hard. "I could destroy you," he said. "One phone call. Russo would have warrants out within hours. You'd be in handcuffs by dinner." "Then do it. Make the call. But understand that the moment you do, you've burned your last bridge. No one in this city will work with you. Not the families, not the independents, not anyone. You'll be the man who turned rat, and that reputation doesn't wash off." "You think I care about reputation? I've got nothing left. You took it all. I took what you were too incompetent to keep." Alessia stood as well, matching his height with her posture. "You want to know the truth? You started losing this empire 3 years ago when you decided ego was more important than effectiveness. I just formalized what was already happening, and now you're standing here trying to extort your way back to relevance because you can't accept that you failed. I didn't fail. You betrayed me. I left a sinking ship. There's a difference." They stood there on opposite sides of the bench like boxers in a ring, neither willing to back down. In the distance, Alessia could see Sofia moving closer, ready to intervene if needed. "So that's it?" Luca said finally. "You're just going to let me walk away with this evidence? I'm going to call your bluff. You want to give that evidence to Russo? Go ahead. But know that I've spent the last 2 weeks building defenses. I've got alternate explanations for every transaction. I've got lawyers who'll tear apart your credibility. And I've got documentation showing you personally approved most of the questionable deals. You testify against me. You testify against yourself. Russo offered immunity. Russo offered to consider immunity. That's not the same thing. And even if he grants it, you still have to live with being the man who turned. Every person you ever worked with, every favor you ever called in, every relationship you built, all of it gone the moment you sit in that witness box. Luca picked up the folder, held it like a weapon. You're betting I won't do it. I'm betting you're smarter than you've been acting. But if I'm wrong, then we both go down. At least I'll have the satisfaction of knowing I didn't give you an inch. You really hate me that much? The question caught her off guard. She looked at him, really looked at him, and tried to find any remnant of the man she'd married. The charming one who'd sent flowers. The ambitious one who'd wanted to build an empire. The passionate one who'd made her believe they were partners. He wasn't there anymore. Or maybe he'd never been real in the first place. I don't hate you, she said finally. I just don't respect you anymore. And I can't give power to someone I don't respect. It's bad business. Luca stood there for another moment, then turned and walked away without another word. Alessia watched him go, feeling a strange mix of relief and something that might have been grief. The man she'd married was really gone. What was left was just a bitter stranger with a folder full of threats. Sophia materialized at her elbow. That looked intense. He tried to extort me, offered to make the federal case go away if I gave him territory. What did you say? No. Alessia started walking back toward her car. He's bluffing. If he really wanted to burn everything down, he would have done it already. The fact that he came here trying to negotiate means he's still looking for an exit that doesn't leave him completely destroyed. You hope. I know. Luca's a lot of things, but he's not actually suicidal. And going full cooperation with the feds would be career suicide in this world. Alessia unlocked her car, slid into the driver's seat. Still, we need to accelerate our defensive preparations, just in case I'm wrong. The next few days were a controlled frenzy of activity. The lawyers worked overtime, creating legitimate explanations for questionable transactions. Financial records got reorganized with paper trails that suggested everything was above board. Shell companies were dissolved or restructured. It was like watching a magic trick in reverse, taking something obviously illegal and making it look almost legitimate. Tony Vaccaro disappeared on Wednesday, just didn't show up for a scheduled meeting and didn't answer his phone. Marco tracked him down to a hotel across town where he'd apparently holed up with a bottle of scotch and a crisis of conscience. He's talking about making a deal, Marco reported. Says the pressure's too much, that he can't sleep, that he's going to end up in prison either way, so he might as well get immunity. Bring him to me, Alicia said. Not violently, just convince him we need to talk. They met in the office later that afternoon. Tony looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled, smelling like alcohol and fear. He sat in the chair across from Alicia's desk and wouldn't meet her eyes. I can't do this, he said. I can't sit around waiting to get arrested. I have a family, kids in college. If I go to prison, you're not going to prison. You don't know that. The feds are building a case. Luca's talking. That PI has documentation. It's over. It's not over. Tony, look at me. Alessia waited until he did. I understand you're scared. This is scary. But running to the feds and making a deal isn't going to save you. It's going to make everything worse. How? If I cooperate, I get immunity. If you cooperate, you burn every bridge you have in this city. Your reputation is destroyed. And what happens when the feds don't need you anymore? You think they're going to keep protecting you? Give you a new identity? You'll be a known informant with no organization backing you up and no way to earn a living except legitimate work. Can you really see yourself going back to a day job after 20 years in this life? Tony's hands were shaking. I just want out. I want my life back. Then stay the course. Let the lawyers handle the legal side. Keep your head down and your mouth shut. If we all stay unified, Russo's case falls apart. He needs cooperating witnesses to corroborate Luca's testimony. If he doesn't get them, it's just one bitter ex-husband making accusations. What if he offers me a deal I can't refuse? Then you call me before you take it. You let me know what they're offering so we can counter it. But Tony, the moment you start talking to the feds without telling me, you're on your own. And you really don't want to be on your own in this situation. It wasn't quite a threat, but it was close. Tony heard it clearly. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, I'll stay quiet. Good. Now go home, get some sleep, take care of your family, and trust that I've got this handled. After Tony left, Marco lingered in the doorway. You think he'll hold? For now, but we need to keep an eye on him. If the feds approach him directly, he might panic. Alicia rubbed her eyes, fighting exhaustion. How many more do we have like Tony? People who are ready to break? Hard to say, maybe 3 or 4 who are nervous enough to consider it. Then we need to shore them up. Personal meetings with each one, reassurance, incentives, whatever it takes. I can't have people jumping ship because they're scared. The outreach worked mostly. By the end of the week, Alessia had personally met with everyone she considered a flight risk. She'd offered bonuses, made promises, and in a few cases made very clear what would happen if they cooperated with federal investigators. It was exhausting and depressing in equal measure, but necessary. On Friday afternoon, the divorce papers were finalized. Patricia called to confirm that the filing had been accepted by the court and that Luca had been served. How did he take it? Alessia asked. His lawyer said he'll contest it, claims you're hiding assets and that he's entitled to half of everything. He signed a prenup. He's claiming the prenup is invalid because you coerced him into signing it. Alessia laughed, sharp and humorless. I coerced him. That's perfect. The man who literally killed people is claiming I coerced him into signing a legal document. It's not going anywhere, but it will drag out the process. Could take 6 months or more to finalize. That's fine. The important thing is establishing the legal separation. Let him fight about assets all he wants. That evening, Alessia met Isabella for dinner at an upscale restaurant where the waiters knew better than to hover too close to their table. They ordered wine and seafood and talked about everything except business for the first 20 minutes, a deliberate break from the constant pressure. Finally, Isabella said, You look tired. I am tired. I've been tired since this whole thing started. How are you holding up, honestly? Alessia considered the question. I'm functional. I'm managing. But there are days when I wonder if it's worth it. When I think maybe I should just walk away, take what I can carry, and start over somewhere else. You won't, though. No, I won't. Because if I walk away now, I prove everyone right who said a woman couldn't hold this position. I prove Luca right, and I'm too stubborn to let that happen. Isabella smiled. Good. Stubbornness is underrated. But you need to start thinking long term. This crisis will pass eventually. The question is what happens after? Assuming I'm not in prison? Assuming that, yes. What's your vision for the organization? Where do you want it to be in 5 years? Alessia had been so focused on immediate survival that she hadn't thought much about the future. But Isabella's question forced her to consider it. Smaller, she said finally, more focused. I want to phase out the high-risk operations, the ones that attract federal attention, and shift toward legitimate businesses. Real estate, construction, maybe some financial services. Still profitable, but cleaner. That's a long transition. I know, but I think it's necessary. The old way of doing things, violence, intimidation, obvious criminal activity, it's not sustainable anymore. Law enforcement is too sophisticated. The legal system is too aggressive. We either evolve or we die. You sound like me 30 years ago. I had the same vision. Spent 2 decades trying to legitimize the Castellano operations. Isabella sipped her wine. You know what I learned? What? That you can't ever completely wash the blood off. No matter how many legitimate businesses you build, no matter how respectable you become, there's always someone who remembers where the money came from originally. The original sin stays with you. That's bleak. That's realistic. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Just understand that you're building for the next generation, not for yourself. You'll probably never be truly legitimate, but your successors might be. I don't have successors, no kids, remember? Then find some. Or train people who can take over when you're ready to step back. The organization will outlive you either way. Might as well shape it into something you can be proud of. They finished dinner discussing potential transitions and strategies. Isabella had experience with this kind of long-term planning, and her insights were valuable. By the time they parted ways, Alicia felt more grounded, more purposeful. The weekend passed quietly for once. No crises, no emergencies, just paperwork and phone calls, and the ordinary business of running a criminal empire. Alessia spent Sunday in her garden, pruning roses and pulling weeds, finding unexpected peace in the physical work. Her phone rang around 4. Sophia, we've got movement on Luca. He met with someone at a coffee shop this morning. We got photos. Who was it? That's the interesting part. Remember the second mysterious visitor at the hotel? The one we couldn't identify? Yeah. Turns out he's not a PI. He's a literary agent. Name's Richard Morrison. Represents true crime authors, journalists, people writing exposés. Alessia felt her stomach drop. Luca's writing a book. Looks like it. We pulled Morrison's client list. He represents 3 authors who've written about organized crime. One of them won a Pulitzer. So Luca's planning to tell his story. Publicly. That's what it looks like. And if he's writing a book, he doesn't need Russo's immunity. He just needs to frame everything as his personal recollection and hide behind First Amendment protections. This was worse than the federal cooperation. A book would be public, permanent, and impossible to suppress. It would air every dirty secret, every criminal act, every detail that Alicia had spent 2 weeks trying to bury. Find out what Morrison knows, Alicia said. How far along is the book? Does he have a publisher? What's the timeline? Already on it. But Alicia, if this is real, we can't stop it. Not legally, not without making everything worse. I know. Let me think. She ended the call and sat in her garden, surrounded by roses and the gathering darkness, trying to think of a way out of this new problem. A federal prosecution could be defended against. Evidence could be challenged, witnesses discredited, deals negotiated. But a book? A published public account of life inside the DeRossi organization? That was different. That was permanent. Her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. You should have taken the deal. Now everyone gets to know the truth. L. So Luca knew she knew, and he wanted her to know he didn't care. Alessia forwarded the text to Sophia, then called Isabella. He's writing a book, she said when Isabella answered. A tell-all. Everything about the organization, about me, about how it all works. Isabella was quiet for a moment. Can you stop him? Not without making it worse. If I try to suppress it, that just confirms everything he's saying. And it gives him more material, the wife who tried to silence him. So you let him publish? I don't see another option, unless you have ideas. What if you published first? The suggestion caught Alessia off guard. What? Beat him to it. Find your own writer. Tell your own version of the story, not the criminal details. Those stay buried. But the narrative of a woman who built a business empire, who stood up to corruption, who fought for control. Frame it as a story about business and power dynamics and gender. Let him publish his bitter ex-husband's screed after you've already controlled the narrative. It was crazy. It was also kind of brilliant. I'd need someone good. Someone who could write it without exposing us to legal liability. I know someone. Magazine writer who does long-form pieces about business and power. She's done profiles on CEOs, politicians, people in complicated industries. She knows how to tell a story without getting sued. Isabella paused. She also knows when to leave things out. Set up a meeting. Let me talk to her. You're serious about this? Luca wants a war of narratives? Fine. Let's give him one. But on my terms. The writer's name was Jennifer Huang, and she met Alessia at a cafe downtown on Tuesday morning. She was early 40s, wearing jeans and a blazer with a notebook and a recorder that she kept turned off until Alessia gave permission. Isabella said you had an interesting story, Jennifer said after they'd ordered coffee. Interesting is one word for it. Complicated is another. Alessia had spent the past 2 days thinking about how to frame this. I'm going through a high-profile divorce. My ex-husband is writing a book about our life together, and it's going to be ugly. I want to tell my own version before his comes out. What kind of book is he writing? A bitter tell-all. Accusations, resentment, score settling. The kind of thing people will buy because they love drama. And what's your version? That I spent 13 years building a business while married to a man who took credit for my work. That when I finally decided to step out of his shadow, he couldn't handle it. That this is fundamentally a story about power and gender and what happens when a woman refuses to stay in her assigned role. Jennifer made notes. That's a strong narrative, but I'll need details. Background. Enough to make it compelling without being exploitative. I can give you details, with boundaries. There are things I can't talk about for legal reasons, but there's plenty I can share about the business side, the relationship dynamics, the power plays. This would be a major piece, maybe a book of its own. You understand that? I understand, and I'm willing to do it. but I need editorial control. Nothing gets published without my approval. That's not how journalism works. Then this isn't journalism. It's a collaboration. You write it, I approve it, we both control the narrative. Alessia leaned forward. I'm offering you an inside look at a world most people never see. The real story of how power works in this city. That's valuable. But it comes with conditions. Jennifer thought about it. I'd want to interview other people, get corroboration, make sure this isn't just your spin on events. I can arrange interviews with select people, with parameters about what they can and can't discuss. And if I find inconsistencies, if your version doesn't match what others say, then we discuss it. But understand that my ex has his own agenda. He's going to paint me as a villain because that's easier than admitting he failed. I need someone who can see through that and tell the actual story. They talked for 2 more hours, negotiating terms and boundaries. By the time they finished, Jennifer had agreed to take on the project with the understanding that it would be a collaborative biography. Part business memoir, part relationship study, part examination of power dynamics in unconventional industries. This is going to make waves, Jennifer said as they parted ways. You know that, right? Good. Let it make waves. I'm done hiding. Alessia spent the next week dividing her time between running the organization and working with Jennifer on the book. They met daily, sometimes for hours at a time, going through Alessia's history from business school to meeting Luca to building the empire. Jennifer was good. She asked probing questions and didn't accept surface answers, but she also understood where the legal lines were and how to dance around them. The operational side continued smoothly, mostly. The South Side territory stayed secure. The construction projects moved forward. Revenues held steady despite the federal pressure. Marco reported that most people had stopped asking whether Alessia could hold power and started accepting that she already had. On Thursday, Sophia brought news about Luca's book. We got a look at his proposal. It's called The Queen of Crime, My Life with a Female Mafia Boss. Alessia couldn't help it. She laughed. Queen of Crime. He's really going for the dramatic title. It gets better. The pitch describes you as a master manipulator who seduced him, took over his organization, and now controls a criminal empire through cunning and ruthlessness. He's positioning himself as the victim who finally escaped. Has he found a publisher? 2 are interested. Both want to see sample chapters before committing. Morrison thinks he can get a 6-figure advance. How far along is he? Maybe a quarter finished. He's apparently holed up somewhere writing 8 hours a day. Motivated. Let him write. By the time his book comes out, mine will already be in bookstores. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. If Luca wants to make this public, then it's public. But I get to control my half of the story. That evening, Alessia had dinner with Domenico and Maria to discuss financial restructuring. They were in the middle of dessert when Maria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, then looked up at Alessia. You need to see this. She passed the phone over. It was a news alert. Federal prosecutor Anthony Russo announces major organized crime investigation. Alessia's hands went cold as she read the article. Russo had given a press conference announcing a sweeping RICO investigation into organized crime operations in the city. He didn't name names, but he made it clear that arrests were coming and that he had cooperating witnesses. He's making it public, Domenico said. That means he thinks his case is strong enough to withstand scrutiny, or he's trying to pressure more people into cooperating. Alessia read through the article again. Either way, this accelerates everything. We need to be ready. She spent the rest of the evening calling lawyers and warning key people that federal pressure was about to intensify. The consensus was that Russo would start with lower-level arrests, trying to flip people and build his way up to the leadership. Standard RICO strategy. The question was how many people would flip before he got to Alessia. The answer started coming on Friday when 2 of their peripheral associates got arrested. Guys who ran small-time operations and probably didn't know enough to do real damage, but who might panic and start talking anyway. By Monday, the arrest count was up to 7. Alessia watched it unfold with a strange sense of detachment. This was the thing she'd been preparing for, the crisis she'd seen coming. And now that it was here, all she could do was execute the plan and hope it held. Tony Vaccaro lasted until Tuesday. He got arrested on tax evasion charges, apparently Russo's way of applying pressure, and by Wednesday morning, he'd cut a deal. Sophia found out through her police contacts and called Alessia immediately. Tony flipped. He's cooperating fully. testimony, documents, everything. What does he know? Enough to be problematic. He handled some of the union operations. He knows about the bid rigging schemes, the bribery, the enforcement tactics. Can he tie me to any of it directly? Probably not. He mostly dealt with Luca, but he can provide context that supports Russo's narrative. One domino falling. The question was how many more would follow. By Thursday, 2 more people had been arrested and 1 more had agreed to cooperate. The organization was starting to fracture under the pressure, and Alicia could feel control slipping through her fingers, no matter how tightly she tried to hold on. She called an emergency meeting of the remaining leadership. They gathered at Isabella's warehouse again. It had become their unofficial crisis center, and the mood was tense. "We're hemorrhaging people," Vincent said bluntly. "Every arrest leads to another cooperation agreement. Russo's building momentum." "Then we need to break that momentum," Alicia replied. "What do we have on Russo? Personal life, finances, anything that might give us leverage?" "He's clean," Marco said. "We've been looking. The guy's a Boy Scout. No affairs, no financial problems, no exploitable weaknesses." "Everyone has weaknesses." "Not Russo. He's genuinely one of the good guys. That's what makes him dangerous." Alessia stood, pacing. "Okay, we can't attack Russo directly, but we can undermine his case. Every cooperation agreement depends on the witness being credible, so we attack credibility. We find inconsistencies in their testimony. We dig up their own criminal histories. We make it clear that these are career criminals trying to save themselves, not credible witnesses to anything." "That's going to take time," Domenico said. "Then we better start now. I want a file on every person who's cooperated, everything they've ever done, every lie they've ever told, every reason a jury might not believe them." They divided up the work and dispersed. Alessia stayed behind with Isabella, who'd been watching the meeting with her usual unreadable expression. "You're losing this fight," Isabella said quietly. "Maybe, but I'm not giving up. There's a difference between not giving up and throwing good money after bad. At some point, you have to consider cutting your losses." "You're saying I should run." "I'm saying you should have an exit strategy, just in case." Alessia sat down heavily. "If I run, I lose everything. The organization, my reputation, the life I built. I become exactly what Luca's book will say I am. A criminal who got caught and fled. Better than being a criminal who got caught and went to prison. Is it? I don't know anymore." Alessia looked at the older woman. "Did you ever think about walking away when things got hard?" "Every day for about 10 years. Then I realized I was in too deep to ever really get out. The life doesn't let you go that easily." Isabella poured them both whiskey. "But you're not me. You're younger. You have options. If it comes down to prison or exile, choose exile." "I'll keep that in mind." But Alessia had no intention of running. Not yet. Not while there was still a chance to fight back and win. The arrests kept coming through March like a slow-motion avalanche. 8 people, then 12, then 15. Each one sent ripples through the organization. Each cooperation agreement another crack in the foundation. Alessia worked 18-hour days trying to shore up what was left, but it felt like trying to hold water in cupped hands. No matter how tightly she gripped, something always slipped through. The worst part wasn't the arrests themselves. It was watching people she'd worked with for years cave under pressure that she'd been preparing them to withstand. Frank, the union boss, lasted 72 hours in custody before agreeing to testify. One of Domenico's lieutenants gave up names for a reduced sentence. Even Maria looked shaken when Alessia met with her on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. "My father's talking about taking a deal," Maria said quietly. They were in a coffee shop far from the usual haunts, somewhere nobody knew them. "He thinks Russo's going to arrest him next, and he doesn't want to die in prison." Alessia had been expecting this, but it still hit hard. Domenico had been solid from the beginning. "What kind of deal?" "Limited cooperation. He'd testify about operational structure, money flow, that kind of thing. But he wouldn't name names if he could avoid it. Russo's people suggested he could probably get away with house arrest given his age and health issues." "That's not limited cooperation. That's giving Russo the roadmap to the entire organization." "I know, but he's 63 with high blood pressure and diabetes. He's scared." Maria's voice cracked slightly. "I can't watch my father go to prison, Alessia. I just can't. And there it was. The thing that broke empires faster than any federal investigation. People protecting the ones they loved. Alessia couldn't even blame her. If she had someone she cared about that much, she'd probably make the same choice. Tell your father I understand, Alessia said finally. If he takes a deal, I won't hold it against him. But ask him to give me 2 weeks before he signs anything. I might have a way out of this that doesn't require anyone testifying. What way? I'm working on it. Just trust me for 2 more weeks. After Maria left, Alessia sat in the coffee shop for another hour, watching rain streak down the windows and thinking about Isabella's advice. Maybe it was time to consider an exit strategy. Not running exactly, but a controlled retreat. Something that would protect the people who'd been loyal while minimizing the damage from the ones who hadn't. She called Jennifer Huang. How fast can you finish the book? Fast as in publication ready? 4 months maybe? Why? Because I need it done in 6 weeks, 8 maximum. That's impossible. There's still 3 chapters to write, then editing, fact-checking. Skip the fact-checking. We'll handle that internally, and the editing can happen simultaneously with the writing. I need this book in the world before Lucas comes out, and I need it to set the narrative so firmly that anything he publishes looks like bitter revenge fantasizing. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. You're accelerating because of the federal investigation, aren't you? You want the book out before you potentially get arrested. Among other reasons, can you do it or not? It won't be perfect. Perfect is the enemy of done. Can you do it? Yeah, I can do it. But it's going to cost more, and you're going to have to be available for intensive interview sessions, every day if needed. Done. Send me the revised contract. The next 6 weeks were a blur. Alessia spent her mornings managing what remained of the organization, and her afternoons locked in a room with Jennifer, telling stories about building an empire from nothing. They worked chronologically, starting with her business school days and moving through meeting Luca, the early years of growth, the slow realization that she was the one actually running things, and finally, the decision to take control. Jennifer was good at drawing out details without pushing into dangerous territory. She framed everything in terms of legitimate business, power dynamics, organizational structure, leadership challenges. The criminal aspects stayed vague, implied, but never explicit. What emerged was a portrait of a woman navigating a male-dominated industry while married to a man who took credit for her work. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. The best lies never were. By mid-April, they had a draft. Alessia read it in one sitting, making notes and adjustments. Jennifer had titled it Behind the Throne, How I Built an Empire in the Shadows. The narrative was compelling, the pacing tight, the emotional beats genuine. Most importantly, it painted Alessia as competent and strategic rather than criminal and ruthless. This works, Alessia said. Get it to publishers immediately. I want offers by the end of the week. Publishers don't move that fast. They will for this. Trust me. She was right. By Friday, they had 3 competing offers from major publishers who recognized the commercial potential of a female-led business memoir with organized crime undertones. Jennifer negotiated aggressively, and by the following Tuesday, they had a deal: 6-figure advance, expedited publication schedule, major marketing push. The book would hit shelves in 8 weeks. Lucas wouldn't be out for at least 6 months. Alessia called Isabella to share the news. We did it. Publication date is set for June 15th. That's fast. You're sure about this? I'm sure I don't have any better options. If I'm going down, at least I control the story of how I got here. You're not going down. You're too stubborn. Stubbornness doesn't beat federal prosecutors, Isabella. Eventually they win. They always win. The question is how much damage they do on the way. That damage crystallized on April 22nd when Alessia got a call from her lawyer at 6 in the morning. Russo's moving, David Chen said without preamble. Grand jury handed down indictments last night. Yours is among them. Alessia had been expecting this for weeks, but her stomach still dropped. What are the charges? RICO conspiracy, money laundering, wire fraud, tax evasion. They're throwing everything at you. I'm looking at the indictment now. It's 147 pages. When do they want me to surrender? Monday morning, 9 a.m. at the federal building. Alicia, this is serious. If they convict on even half these charges, you're looking at 20 years minimum. I know. Start preparing the defense. I'll be at your office this afternoon to go through everything." She hung up and sat on the edge of her bed, feeling the weight of it all finally crash down. This was it. The thing she'd been fighting to prevent for months. She'd lost. Or had she? Alessia got dressed, made coffee, and started making calls. First to Sophia, then to Marco, then to Isabella. By noon, she'd assembled everyone who mattered at the warehouse for what she suspected might be the last time. "Most of you have probably heard by now," she said, standing at the head of the table. "I was indicted this morning. So we're 5 of you in this room. The federal government is bringing the full weight of their prosecutorial power down on this organization, and they're not going to stop until they get convictions." The room was silent. These were people who'd survived street fights and turf wars and rival families, but the federal government was different. The federal government didn't play by the same rules. "I'm not going to lie to you," Alicia continued. "This is bad. Worse than anything we've faced before. Some of you are probably thinking about deals, about cooperation agreements and reduced sentences. And I understand that. I do. You have families, lives, futures to protect." She paused, making eye contact with each person. "But here's what I want you to understand. If we fracture now, we all go down harder. Russo's case depends on witnesses corroborating each other. If we stay unified, if we fight as a group with consistent stories and good legal defense, we have a chance. Not a great chance, but a chance." "What kind of chance?" someone asked. "Vincent, probably. Honestly, maybe 30%. The evidence is substantial. Russo's good at his job. But 30% is better than 0, which is what you'll have if you cooperate and then get convicted anyway because your deal falls through." Why would deals fall through? This from one of the peripheral guys, someone Alicia barely knew. Because prosecutors make promises they don't always keep. Because your testimony might not be valuable enough to justify immunity. Because you might say something they don't like, and they'll pull the deal. It happens all the time. Alicia leaned forward, hands on the table. "I'm offering you an alternative. We pool resources for legal defense. We present a unified front. We fight this thing properly instead of scrambling to save ourselves individually." "And if we lose?" Marco asked quietly. "Then we lose together. And at least we can say we didn't roll over." It wasn't inspiring exactly, but it was honest. And honesty seemed to matter more in this moment than false hope. They discussed strategy for 2 hours. David Chen joined them via video call, explaining the legal complexities and the defense approach. The plan was to attack the credibility of cooperating witnesses, demonstrate that much of the documentation could be interpreted as legitimate business activity, and argue that Alessia was being unfairly targeted because Russo wanted a high-profile conviction. It was a long shot, but it was something. After the meeting, Isabella pulled Alicia aside. "You know this might not work, right? No matter how good your lawyers are." "I know, but I had to try." "What's your actual plan? And don't tell me this is it, because I know you better than that." Alessia looked at the older woman, this mentor who'd helped her navigate impossible situations, and decided she deserved the truth. "If the trial goes badly, I'm gone. I have accounts set up in 3 different countries under names that can't be traced to me. I have documents, money, everything I need to disappear." "When did you set this up?" 2 years ago, when I first started planning to take over from Luca. "I'm not stupid, Isabella. I've always known this life doesn't have happy endings. The best you can hope for is an exit that doesn't leave you dead or imprisoned." "And the organization? If I run, it dissolves. The leadership structure falls apart. People scatter or go independent. It won't be pretty, but it'll survive in some form." Alessia paused. "Unless you want it. If I disappear, you could absorb what's left. Consolidate your power, expand your territory. It would make you the dominant family in the entire northeastern corridor." Isabella smiled, thin and knowing. "You're offering me your empire as a parting gift. I'm offering you an opportunity, if you want it. Let me think about it. But Alicia, don't run unless you absolutely have to. You've built something here. It would be a shame to abandon it without exhausting every option first." The surrender on Monday morning was surreal. Alessia walked into the federal building with David Chen at her side through a gauntlet of photographers and news cameras. She dressed carefully, dark suit, minimal jewelry, expression neutral. She looked like a businesswoman handling an unfortunate legal matter, not a crime boss facing 20 years. The booking process was humiliating in the way all such things were. fingerprints, photographs, property inventory. They took her watch, her phone, her wedding ring that she'd kept wearing out of habit more than sentiment. She was processed alongside 5 other people from her organization, all of them avoiding eye contact like they could pretend this wasn't happening if they didn't acknowledge each other. The arraignment was brief. Alessia pled not guilty, bail was set at $2 million, and she was released to await trial. The whole thing took maybe 40 minutes, and then she was back outside in the spring sunshine, feeling disconnected from her own body. That went as well as could be expected, David said. No surprises. When's the trial? They're saying 6 months. Maybe sooner if Russo pushes for it. He will. He wants this resolved before the publicity from my book gives me too much sympathy. Alessia got into the car where Sophia was waiting. Let's go, I need to think. She spent the rest of the day fielding calls and managing the fallout. The indictment had made national news. Female crime boss charged in massive RICO case. And the coverage was exactly as sensationalized as she'd expected. Some outlets focused on the gender angle, treating her like some kind of feminist icon for breaking into male-dominated organized crime. Others painted her as a black widow, a manipulator who'd seduced and betrayed her way to power. None of them had the actual story. That would come with the book. Jennifer called that evening. The publisher wants to move up the release date, strike while the media interest is hot. They're thinking May 15th now instead of June. Do it, the sooner it's out the better. You understand this is going to make you even more of a target, right? Russo will use the book against you, claim it's an admission of guilt. Let him. By the time he gets to trial, public opinion will be on my side. That matters more than people think. The book hit shelves on May 13th, 2 days early, because the publisher wanted to capitalize on weekend sales. Alicia woke up that Saturday morning to her phone exploding with notifications. Messages from people she hadn't heard from in years. Interview requests from major news outlets, 3 different production companies wanting to option the film rights. The book was a hit. By Monday, it was number 3 on the bestseller list. By Wednesday, it was number 1. Jennifer had done her job perfectly. The story was compelling enough to attract general readers, but carefully worded enough to avoid giving prosecutors anything they could use. It painted Alicia as a woman who'd navigated a difficult industry and a difficult marriage, who'd built something substantial through intelligence and determination. The public ate it up. Suddenly she wasn't just an accused criminal. She was a complicated figure, maybe even a sympathetic one. News segments debated whether she was a victim of circumstance or an architect of her own downfall. Opinion pieces argued about gender and power and what it meant that a woman had succeeded in a traditionally male space. Luca's response came via his own book announcement. His publisher had apparently decided to capitalize on the attention and rushed his manuscript to completion. The Queen of Crime would be out in 3 weeks, promising the real story behind the headlines. Alessia read the advance publicity and felt nothing. Let him publish. Let him tell whatever bitter version of events made him feel better about his failures. She'd already won the narrative war. The trial began on a muggy Tuesday in late June. The courthouse was packed with journalists, curious onlookers, and enough federal marshals to invade a small country. Alessia sat at the defense table in a gray suit, flanked by David Chen and 2 other lawyers, watching the jury selection process with detached interest. The prosecution's strategy became clear during opening statements. Russo painted a picture of a criminal organization that had operated for over a decade, corrupting officials, moving illegal money, and using violence to maintain control. He positioned Alessia not as a peripheral figure, but as the mastermind, the person who'd actually been running things while her husband served as the public face. It was uncomfortably close to the truth, which made it dangerous. David's opening statement took a different approach. He acknowledged that, yes, Alessia had been involved in business operations, but those operations were largely legitimate: real estate development, construction contracts, union negotiations. If some individuals within the organization had acted illegally, that didn't make Alicia responsible for their actions. She was a businesswoman who'd been married to a man with criminal associates, not a crime boss orchestrating illegal activities. The jury looked skeptical but not hostile. That was something. The prosecution's case took 3 weeks to present. They paraded cooperating witnesses through the stand: Tony Vaccaro, Frank the union boss, 2 of Domenico's guys who'd taken deals. Each one told a version of the same story. that Alessia had been the real power, that she'd structured the operations, that she'd made the decisions. David cross-examined them ruthlessly. He highlighted their criminal histories, their plea agreements, their motivations for testifying. He made it clear that these were people trying to reduce their own sentences by giving prosecutors what they wanted to hear. The most damaging testimony came from Luca himself. Russo called him as a witness in week 4, and Alessia watched her ex-husband take the stand with a strange sense of surrealism. He looked better than he had at their park meeting, had gained back some weight, cleaned himself up, probably preparing for his book publicity tour. Luca described their marriage, the organization, the operations. He positioned himself as someone who'd been manipulated by a woman more clever and ruthless than anyone realized. He painted Alessia as the architect of criminal enterprises, while claiming he'd just been a figurehead who'd tried to rein in her excesses. It was a complete inversion of reality, and it made Alessia's blood boil. But she kept her face neutral, making notes and occasionally whispering to David. The cross-examination was brutal. David spent 2 full days shredding Luca's credibility. He brought up the affairs, the financial mismanagement, the reasons Alessia had taken control in the first place. He read excerpts from Luca's book manuscript, which David had somehow obtained, showing how the story changed depending on whether Luca was talking to prosecutors or trying to sell books. By the time David finished, Luca looked small and petty and deeply unreliable. The jury was paying attention now, seeing through the performance. The defense case was simpler. David called character witnesses, business associates who testified to Alessia's professionalism and competence. He called accountants who explained how the financial transactions could be interpreted as legitimate business activity. He even called Isabella Castellano, who testified that Alessia was a respected businesswoman in a complicated industry, someone who'd earned her position through merit rather than manipulation. Alessia herself didn't testify. Too risky. Anything she said could be picked apart, and the Fifth Amendment protected her silence. The jury got the case on a Friday afternoon in late July. They deliberated through the weekend and into the following week. Each day felt like a year. Alessia went through the motions of normal life, meetings with lawyers, calls with Sophia, dinners with Isabella. But everything felt suspended, waiting for the verdict that would determine her future. On Wednesday afternoon, the jury sent word they'd reached a decision. Alessia was in the office when David called. "They have a verdict. Judge wants everyone back in court in an hour. What do you think?" "I think we did everything we could. The rest is out of our hands." The courtroom was packed when Alessia arrived. She took her seat at the defense table, feeling hyper-aware of every detail, the fluorescent lights overhead, the smell of recycled air, the weight of everyone's eyes on her back. The jury filed in. Alessia tried to read their faces and found nothing. They looked tired. That was all she could determine. The judge asked if they'd reached a verdict. The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor. On count 1, racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations conspiracy. How do you find?" "Not guilty." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. Alessia sat frozen, not quite believing what she'd heard. On count 2, money laundering. Not guilty. Count after count. Not guilty. Not guilty. Not guilty. They'd won. Against all odds, against all expectations, the jury had rejected the prosecution's case. Alessia had beaten the federal government. David was shaking her hand, talking about what this meant, but Alessia could barely hear him over the roaring in her ears. She looked back and found Sophia in the gallery, tears streaming down her face. Isabella sitting calm and satisfied. Marco grinning like he'd won the lottery. She'd actually done it. The press conference outside the courthouse was chaos. Microphones everywhere, cameras in her face, reporters shouting questions. David handled most of it, giving a statement about justice prevailing and truth winning out. When he passed the microphone to Alessia, she kept it simple. "I'm grateful to the jury for seeing through the prosecution's narrative. I'm grateful to my legal team for their incredible work. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to rebuild my life after these false accusations." She paused. "That's all I have to say." The questions kept coming, but she turned and walked away. Let them speculate, let them debate. She was done performing. The victory party that night at Isabella's warehouse was small and subdued. These were people who'd lived with the possibility of prison for months. Relief hadn't quite caught up with reality yet. "You know Russo's going to appeal?" Isabella said, sitting with Alessia on the warehouse steps while the party continued inside. Let him. The jury acquitted. That's hard to overturn. Alessia looked up at the night sky, at stars barely visible through city light pollution. It's over. I can't quite believe it, but it's over. The trial's over. But the life isn't. You understand that, right? This doesn't erase everything that happened. The organization's smaller now, weaker. You have enemies who think the verdict was a fluke. You're going to spend the next year rebuilding. I know, but that's tomorrow's problem. Alicia stood, stretched. Tonight, I'm just going to enjoy not being convicted of federal crimes. The rebuilding started the next day anyway. Alessia met with the remaining operational heads. There were only 5 now. Everyone else had scattered during the trial, and laid out a vision for the future. Smaller operations, more legitimate businesses, careful expansion, everything Isabella had suggested months ago. Domenico had taken his deal and was under house arrest, but Maria agreed to take over his operations with Alessia's guidance. Vincent stayed on construction. Marco handled security. Together they represented maybe a third of what the organization had been at its height, but it was sustainable. More importantly, it was controllable. Luca's book came out in August to middling reviews and disappointing sales. Critics pointed out the inconsistencies between his courtroom testimony and his published account. Readers seemed to prefer Alessia's version, the capable woman navigating a difficult world, over Luca's bitter complaints about being betrayed. His book tour was poorly attended, and by September the publisher had remaindered most of the copies. Alessia would have felt bad for him if she had any sympathy left, but she'd used it all up somewhere around his third cooperating witness. She saw him one last time in October at the final divorce hearing. He looked diminished, worn down by the unsuccessful book and the realization that his testimony hadn't resulted in Alicia's conviction. The judge granted the divorce, divided assets according to the prenup, and that was it. 13 years of marriage dissolved in 15 minutes of legal proceedings. Was it worth it? Luca asked as they walked out of the courthouse, maintaining distance like strangers. Everything you did, everything you went through, was it worth it? Alessia thought about the question, about the sleepless nights and the constant fear and the moral compromises that had gotten her here, about the empire she'd built and nearly lost and was now rebuilding into something different. Yeah, she said finally. It was, because the alternative had been staying in his shadow forever, being the invisible architect of someone else's kingdom. And she'd decided years ago that she'd rather burn everything down than accept invisible. Luca walked away without another word. Alessia watched him go, this man who'd once been her whole world, and felt nothing. The love had died. The hate had faded. What remained was just the simple fact of him, a person she used to know who'd made different choices than she had. She got in her car and drove home to the empty house that was finally, legally, entirely hers. Sophia was waiting in the kitchen with coffee and a folder of reports. The usual chaos: West Side operations need a decision on the real estate portfolio, construction contracts need review, and Isabella called. She wants to discuss a potential partnership on the waterfront development. Alessia took the coffee, flipped through the reports. Normal problems. Manageable problems. The kind she'd been solving for years while everyone thought Luca was in charge. Tell Isabella I'm interested. Schedule it for this week. She set down the folder. And Sophia? Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done any of this without you. We're not done yet. There's still a lot to rebuild. I know, but we have time now. For once, we actually have time. They worked through the afternoon making decisions and sending instructions and slowly putting the pieces back together. It would take months, maybe years, to get back to anything resembling the old power structure. But Alessia wasn't in a hurry anymore. She'd learned something through all of this, that power was less important than control, and control was less important than survival. By evening, she was alone again. She poured a glass of wine and walked through the house, through rooms that had witnessed 13 years of a marriage that had slowly died. Tomorrow she'd probably hire an interior designer, change everything, make it truly hers instead of theirs. But tonight, she just wanted to sit in the silence and process everything that had happened. She'd started this journey as Luca de Rossi's wife, the invisible woman behind the throne. She'd ended it as Alessia Moretti, head of her own organization, acquitted by a jury, best-selling author, complicated public figure. The transformation hadn't been clean or easy or anything like what she'd imagined when she first started planning the takeover. But she'd survived. Against federal prosecutors and betrayals and her own exhaustion, she'd survived. More than that, she'd won. Not perfectly, not without casualties. But in the ways that mattered, she'd taken everything she wanted and made it impossible for anyone to take it back. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. Just got offer for film rights, major studio, 7 figures. You interested? Alicia smiled. Of course Hollywood wanted her story. It had everything. Power, betrayal, gender dynamics, courtroom drama. She could already see the movie poster. She typed back, "Only if I get creative control." The response came quickly. Obviously. "You're Alessia Moretti. You don't do anything without control." And that, Alessia thought, was probably the truest thing anyone had said about her in months. She finished her wine and went upstairs to bed, to the room she'd sleep in alone for the first time in 13 years. Tomorrow she'd start rebuilding the empire. Tomorrow she'd handle the dozen problems waiting in Sophia's folder. Tomorrow she'd begin the long process of transforming a criminal organization into something that might actually last. But tonight, for just a few hours, she let herself feel what she'd been too afraid to feel during the trial, during the investigation, during the entire brutal process of taking power. Pride. She'd done something that most people couldn't even imagine attempting. She'd taken on the federal government and won. She'd faced down her ex-husband's betrayal and come out stronger. She'd turned herself from an invisible wife into a visible force that nobody would dismiss again. The cost had been high. Her marriage, her peace of mind, her sense of safety. She'd lost friends and allies. She'd made enemies she'd be dealing with for years. She'd crossed legal and moral lines that she could never uncross. But she'd gotten what she wanted. Not just power, but recognition. Not just control, but respect. Not just survival, but victory. In the end, maybe that was all anyone could ask for. The chance to choose their own path, even if that path led through darkness. The chance to be seen for who they really were instead of who people wanted them to be. The chance to build something meaningful, even if that something was complicated and morally ambiguous and would probably never appear in any legitimate business school case study. Alessia had been invisible for too long. She'd stood in shadows and let someone else take credit and told herself it was strategic, it was smart, it was the price of partnership. But she'd been lying to herself. She'd been afraid of being seen, afraid of failing, afraid of discovering that maybe she wasn't as capable as she thought. The fear was gone now, burned away by federal investigation and public scrutiny and the simple act of standing in a courtroom and refusing to break. She knew who she was now, not perfect. Not always right, but competent and tough and willing to fight for what she'd built. That knowledge was worth everything it had cost to obtain. Alessia Moretti fell asleep that night in her own house, in her own bed, in her own city, with her own empire waiting to be rebuilt. She fell asleep free and vindicated and powerful in ways she'd never quite managed when she was just the woman behind the throne. And when she dreamed of the future, not the past. Of the empire she'd build this time, knowing everything she knew now. Of the life she'd create on her own terms, answerable to no one but herself. In a world that had been ruled by kings for as long as anyone could remember, Alessia Moretti had become something different, something more dangerous, something that would last. She'd become a queen, not through marriage or inheritance or riding someone else's power, but through her own intelligence, her own strategy, her own refusal to accept invisible when she deserved to be seen. And nobody, not Luca, not Russo, not anyone who doubted her, could ever take that away. The end.